Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Are these ours?
Yes.
Mayor Johnston,
Are we supposed to read these?
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Here.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Francina. Here. Councilmember Wyrick.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. We all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know, I moved, so I'm not in their way that I want to. That's cute.
Okay, we have a public presentation on the ubiquitous water issue. And some folks in the community who have worked really hard to come up with a general approach to the situation. And Richard Hages is with us to make the presentation. Richard?
Mr. Mayor, as he's walking up, shouldn't we approve the agenda first?
You are correct. Thank
Move
you.
approval.
Okay.
Second?
Is there any opposition? If not, so ordered. Proceed, Richard.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, members of the council. I'm a member of the Ojai Valley Water Advisory Group. A group was formed by Larry Yee. You may remember it's been almost a year now. He announced to your council that he was forming this group. Rosalie Sabilla and Peter Theckley are also here. We're the four members to the group. We're volunteers, and we got together and formed somewhat of like a think tank and thought we could simply look over some ideas and maybe get rid of some misconceptions and provide some information to the residents, not only of Ojai, but of Casitas Water District. We wanted to take a fresh and independent and objective look at the water supply options. We've heard a lot of things out there about what may happen, what could be done, what can't be done, where the water's going and where it's not going. So we spent a lot of time. We met every other week for almost a year discussing all this and bringing information to the group. This early education process took a long time because of people's different views. Understanding the relationships among the various agencies, the groundwater management agencies and the water districts in the cities and our neighbors to the east and the city of Ventura and others. We wanted to know, is this a long-term or a short-term problem? We are evaluating the consequences of a water shortage, and can we resolve this problem by ourselves? And what are our realistic options, and who has the authority to address it? We came to the early conclusion that we need an additional water supply. This is a long-term problem. If you look back to the 1970s and 80s, there were less than 50,000 people in the Casitas Water District. Today there's 70,000 people. And on top of that, there's a lot of additional irrigated ag land that depends exclusively on Casitas water. And then while that growth was going on, we lost some of our water supply due to requirements for releases to the Ventura River to support the fishery. We've also lost the benefit of Matilaha Dam pretty much. If it isn't completely gone, it probably will be after the next storm. And we looked at the chronic shortage problem, the economic hardships, the potential loss of agriculture in the community, the general reduction in the quality of life, and we determined this is not acceptable. Looking back in history, when the Casitas project was envisioned and built, it was a result of a drought period very similar to the one that we're in now. The designers of the project developed a safe yield for the project, and it is based on that worst case drought, 1945 to 1966, I believe. And they estimated if you took a certain amount out every year during that drought period, the lake would go dry. Well, we all knew that back in, and I say we, I used to work there 25 years ago. We all knew that, and Casitas joined with other agencies, City of Ventura and United Water District, joined to get a state water project allocation when the state water project was built. They knew that the lake was essentially our supplemental supply. It would provide water to the groundwater users during extreme dry periods. And they knew that eventually with growth, it wouldn't be enough. So as an insurance policy, they bought into the state water project. The problem over the decades has been it's extremely costly to access state water for Casitas or Ventura. The closest access point is Lake Castaic in the Valencia Newhall area. And the three partners, Ventura and United and Casitas, really had very different needs and purposes, so they never could really come together with a plan. Now we're experiencing what could be that forecasted 20-year drought period, and we have no alternative supply. We're on the way down to where the Bureau of Reclamation and others projected we would go. This is the basis of Casitas's planning. This is a 35-year drought and recovery cycle. And basically it says we'll go through the 20-year cycle, but then we will repeat the events of 1969 through 1980, and the lake will fill. They're betting on extraordinary heavy rainfall in order to recover from this. And I think the problem with that is probably based on an anomaly in the historical rainfall events that we were lucky to experience over the past 20 or 30 years, where we've seen the dams spill several times. That probably will not happen that often. So we took a look at that, and if you look at history, this is the Thatcher School rain gauge. And if you look at 1969 through 2006, we had 7 years where we had over 40 inches of rain. From 1906 to 1968, we only had one such event. So you look at that and you think, what is the likelihood that we're going to see 1, 2, 3, even 4 major rain events in the next few years to bail us out of the condition that we're in? We took a more conservative approach, and we went through the data and removed those large year events from the data. There's still some fairly major rain events, but they're all equivalent to about 1962, which was a moderate year. And we took those out and then added Casitas's 5-stage conservation program to it. This is what the future projects, is a chronic condition of being in and out of the stages of the conservation program and never really recovering. Then we looked at our neighbors. Everyone around us is connected to the state system. Camarillo, Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, all of the eastern cities, Oxnard, they're all connected to State Water Project through the Metropolitan and Cayugas systems. Even United Water Conservation District has the ability to bring state water in from Pyramid down Piru Creek into Lake Piru. Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo County, finally after the 1988 through 92 drought, were able to acquire state water into those two counties. Casitas and Ventura are completely isolated. We rely exclusively on rainfall. And we looked at the city of Ventura. The city of Ventura and Casitas have kind of a love-hate relationship. When the district was first formed, all of the city of Ventura was in the district, and no one envisioned that the city would grow east. They actually thought it would grow up the Ventura Avenue towards Oakview. Well, that didn't happen. So even though we share the same customers, only about 2/3 of the city of Ventura is outside the district, and therefore prohibited from taking Casitas water east of Mills Road, basically. Ventura has significant number of varying water supplies. They have groundwater supplies in the east end, and they have groundwater they take from the Ventura River, and they have Casitas water. Casitas has storage, lots of it right now, empty. Ventura and Casitas share a one-way interconnection. Ventura is capable of taking water east, but not capable of delivering water west, and Casitas is not capable of delivering water up into the Ojai Valley or the Rincon. Ventura and Casitas share a 15,000 acre-foot allocation from the State Water Project. 10 of that is the city's, and 5 of it is Casitas's. Then we looked at state water. There's been a lot of problems with the project since it was originally developed. It wasn't completed. So a lot of the allocations that were awarded to the various agencies have never been fully available for a variety of reasons. But historically, 48% of the allocations have been delivered, and that's over the last about 20 years since they started to reduce the allocations. Sometimes there's as little as 5%, so it can be very low. I think 2016 was one of those years. In order to make state water work, you have to have storage. And that's one of the things. I used to work on the east side of the county, and one of the things that happened in 1989 drought is the Metropolitan Water District and Cayugas Water District and all of those districts in the southern part of the state decided they were going to do something to prevent that drought from affecting the economy the way it did in 1989 and 90. And they built huge storage facilities, and they partnered with groundwater basin management and stored water in the ground. They store water in the State Water Project. So storage is what keeps them flush. And if you'll notice, the eastern part of Ventura County is not suffering the way we are from this current drought, because they did manage it very well, and they do have ample supplies. We could take State Water Project water if it was available when it's plentiful. We could reserve local supplies in the lake. So if there's lots of snow and there's lots of water, we could take that water and leave water in storage in Lake Casitas for periods when both areas of the state are dry. And then we'd have ample surplus local supplies even when the State Water Project allocations are reduced. And we took a look at the total supplies of Ventura and Casitas overall, the whole western county. In a dry year, if you combine the water use of the Casitas district and the city of Ventura and compare that to their combined water resources, they have almost an 8,000 acre foot per dry year shortage. And this is what results in the type of allocation and conservation and rationing programs that City of Ventura and Casitas have seen over the years. And this is with, well, that's with state water. So that's a year when the state water is not really available. Now you look at a normal year, and in a normal year, you look at the combined resources of Ventura and Casitas, we have almost a 14,000 acre foot surplus. That's water that could be used and stored for times in drought. Unfortunately, Ventura and Casitas have little ability to share that surplus. They're very rigid on how the boundaries are operated. No water from Casitas can go into the East Ventura. Well, East Ventura, knowing that, and because Casitas water is a cheap, high-quality supply, they take as much as they possibly can to serve the west side of the city, and they ship everything else east. We also met with Cayugas Water District to get an idea of what their plans were. We knew that they were planning an interconnection with the city of Ventura, and what is it that they were planning and what did they want? Well, they have one thing they're looking for, and that's emergency storage. They have a single pipeline that runs through the Santa Susana Mountains from the San Fernando Valley that supplies all of the eastern county. Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, Moore Park, and parts of Camarillo and Oxnard would have no water if that pipeline was severed by an earthquake. Likewise, if the canal somewhere along the State Water Project were damaged by an earthquake, they would be out of water for an extended period of time. Their planning process has indicated a 6-month period to repair those kind of damages. They are currently doing a study to look at alternatives to provide that emergency supply. And they're looking at extremely expensive alternatives. One of them is to bring a pipeline from Castaic all the way over into Moore Park in Somas area. Very expensive. The others are a variety of projects that sum up to the 30,000 acre feet that they're looking for. So they're looking at spending a lot of money to secure a water supply in an emergency for the East County. This may be a rare opportunity if we could partner with them, and the partnership would cost less than some of the projects they're looking at, could finally make acquiring state water and a connection with the rest of the world feasible. Our proposal that we put together is not just a state water plan, though. State water is part of it. The connection is more important, and the cooperation among the agencies is the most important portion. It outlines an opportunity for Ventura and Casitas to pool their resources so that we don't have to go through these type of cyclical drought periods that damage the local economy and may do it more frequently than we're used to. It would return Lake Casitas to a supplemental supply. It would be that storage facility that we would rely on when all the other sources are low. It offers an opportunity to access state water, as I said, but that's not all of it. It also offers the opportunity to access statewide resources. There's groundwater storage programs, there's water exchanges, there's all types of things that are going on out there to make water use and water delivery more efficient. And those are all designed to deal with drought and the shortages that we know we're going to have. It includes an interconnection to the rest of the county. We're isolated from the rest of the county. If something happens to the east part of the county and they're out of water and their economy is damaged, there's a lot of people in this valley that work over there. So their incomes are going to be impacted. We can't live here isolated and believe that what happens around us isn't going to affect us. And it also provides an interconnection to the rest of California. In a catastrophic event, or if we have that terrible drought that many predict it's never going to rain, state of California isn't going to let 40 million people go without water. There'll be solutions. They'll be expensive. There'll probably be desal projects. Who knows what they'll come up with to supply water. But if we have no connection, we're going to be out of luck. We'll be scrambling around trying to figure out how to build a pipeline instead of looking at how we can participate in a statewide effort. The basics of the proposal is expand the Ventura and Callegas interconnection plan that's going on right now to transport water to the western side of City of Ventura and up into Ojai and the Rincon area. Cooperatively, City of Ventura and Casitas cooperatively use state water and local supplies in the Casitas service area, and leave over 13,000 acre feet of water in normal years in the lake. It also includes mutual aid agreements. It promises to aid Callegas in the event of a catastrophic emergency and deliver water to them. In return, Callegas promises to do the same for us, so that if we had some type of catastrophic emergency, we know we have a source that we can access without having to spend 5 years planning for it. This does not give away the lake. I know it's an issue for many at Casitas, and it is a legitimate issue. It does not allow anyone to store water in the lake. It simply provides a means for Ventura and Casitas to optimize their supplies and the storage capacities we have. It offers Callegas water in an emergency, only in an emergency, and they would repay that water when the emergency was over. No foreign water would be put into the lake. Only thing that would go into the lake is local rainfall. Because less water will be taken out of the lake will remain at an average higher level. This is the potential benefit of this type of proposal. What you're looking at, what would be the average lake elevations over that 35-year conservative drought and replenishment cycle. It would only require about 5,600 acre-feet of state water combined with City of Ventura and Casitas. It would reduce the average withdrawals from the lake from 18,000 acre-feet a year to under 12. And the estimated minimum lake elevation during that worst-case 20-year drought and recovery cycle would be 120,000 acre-feet. We're at 80 right now and about to go probably down to 70 by next summer. Efforts that will complement this proposal: conservation. Obviously, the less water we need, the less state water we have to buy, the more water stays in the lake. So improving irrigation, reclamation, groundwater management is a real key, because as long as the people on groundwater can manage their source, they won't need Casitas water as often. A potential enhancement to our groundwater yields by local agencies would also help. Other projects like the horizontal bore project that Casitas is looking at, and the City of Ventura is looking at enhancing some of its Ventura water well. If we act promptly, there's no quick fix. We're in it now, and we're going to have to bear with it for some time. Only rainfall and conservation are going to get us through this period. But I think if we act quickly, we could avoid a decade of rationing and severe water conservation. This is based on 10 years, and this is the projected recovery under a conservative approach. There's no reason why this couldn't be done much sooner. This is our future if we don't do anything. This will be a perpetual in and out of stages of water conservation and water rationing, never being able to predict what we can do in the future, always hoping it's going to rain. The effects of this kind of a cycle on agriculture, business, and real estate values is significant. And the potential change to our quality of life is even hard to imagine. It will impact the Ojai Valley, and this is important for you. This will impact the Ojai Valley and the Rincon more than anyone else. We rely almost exclusively in Ojai on Lake Casitas water. The Rincon relies on Lake Casitas water. City of Ventura has other supplies, and the City of Ventura is working diligently to improve those, so they won't have a problem at all. Even some of the local purveyors like Ventura River County Water District and Miners Oaks, some of the mutuals, are all doing things to shore up their supplies, and they may not suffer the way we may. The cost is always a problem. Right now, the estimated cost of the connection from Callegas to the City of Ventura is $42 million. Modifications to the rest of the system, we don't really know how much that's going to cost. But we do know there's an opportunity right now, because Casitas is prepared to spend a significant amount of money to secure its emergency supply. And they have stated they would be very willing to contribute if this turns out to be a beneficial alternative. Ventura is right now preparing to spend an enormous amount of money to improve their water supply and their water quality. Casitas is eventually going to have to spend money. We just don't know on what yet. We took a look at some extreme cases. What if this costs $100 million? Well, if we share those costs between Casitas and the City of Ventura, the capital cost for $100 million over 25 years at 5% would result in 54 cents per unit of water for all of the customers of Ventura and Casitas. The cost of the State Water Project water, about 45 cents a unit. So the total cost of this might be as high as 99 cents a unit. And this is based on some pretty pessimistic rainfall projections. No project by 2021, Casitas has already adopted a rate schedule that will increase the residential customers' rates to $60 a month. That's $6 a unit. So how many people do you think would be willing to pay 99 cents more to have a secure supply? What are the costs of the shortages and the inequities of the shortages? This is the other thing we talked about. Most everyone participates in the short term. We know what that's like in Ojai. It's not hard to get people.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
How much longer is the presentation? I
It's
don't want to
about-
be rude, but the time, we have a long agenda, and I don't know what to do.
There's about 4 more slides.
Thank you. I just didn't know.
Through the chair, please. Yeah. You got the message, Frank.
Most everyone participates and the community responds well. In a long-term situation where we're in chronic drought, what will happen is those who can afford it will buy the water, and those who can't will suffer. The benefits of this are pretty apparent. Better groundwater levels, less strain on the groundwater supplies, higher lake elevations, and a much broader understanding of a broader relationship with the rest of the county. And I said before, what if it never rains? Well, if it doesn't, we better have that interconnection to the rest of the state. So the time to act, I think, is now. We all feel the pressure. We all are a little bit afraid of what may happen. The fire certainly didn't help. So we need a solution on the horizon. We're not going to fix it today. You can't do that. But if we have a solution, I think people's fears will be relaxed. So the question is, are we going to pass up this opportunity and head out to the desert looking for a better price? I don't know. This is what we asked Casitas to do, to meet with the 3 agencies, join in a joint study. We asked them to take the lead and act with urgency. They met with Ventura and they met with Callegas. I don't know what came of those meetings. I still don't have a sense of urgency. They have indicated that there's plenty of time and they're going to wait for Callegas to complete studies and for Ventura to complete studies. So I don't think we've cracked that wall yet. It looks like there may be a little sliver, but so far they're pretty solid. Their entire operation is based on a 35-year drought and recovery cycle that is really fantasy. Anyway, if you have any questions. Thank you.
Quick question, Richard. What is our time frame, do you think? I'm speaking of us collectively in the valley, to take advantage of this cost-effective option in terms of Callegas participating. In other words, when do they know, how long do they have before they've got to go a different direction? And that option of including a significant capital infusion from them goes away.
Right now they're beginning to conduct a feasibility or alternative analysis of all the various projects that will meet their needs. If that feasibility study comes back that this proposal is institutionally unfeasible, that'll be the end of it. That's supposed to be done sometime this summer.
So we have at best 6 months.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Randy?
Richard, just we've spent about, if you can verify these numbers, or if I'm close to them, but we've spent close to $72 million to date in the county for state water. Am I close?
Yes, I think that's about.
And then the actual west end area, we've actually paid in, was it 30 to 40 million of that 72?
Yeah, it
Right in
sounds
there.
about right.
And we haven't received a drop of state water.
No.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I remember asking this question. In fact, William was there and Angela was there at Casitas, and I asked the Casitas board what the lake was. And they looked at me like, well, what do you think it was? So I answered my own question. It's a reservoir. Am I correct? And that's what you stated here. It's a reservoir. And what we did is, and one of the things you said is, that it's a reservoir to be held in reserve versus a primary use of water. And so what's happened is we've taken this reservoir and we have now created a situation where it's the primary use of water in the area. And now we're talking about them changing their thought process into recreating the mindset that it's a reservoir. That's the fight we're against. That's the fight we're up against. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, 60% of all the water supplied in Casitas Water District comes out of the lake.
And then the last question is, with this last rain, I understand that the OBGMA, our aquifer, is at 80%. Would you believe that Casitas would not be drawing any lake water, that the city of Ojai should not be drawing any lake water at this point in time with our aquifer up to that level?
I would think so. Especially right now, there's just little demand.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Other questions? Yeah, well, this is not a question for tonight, but a question I hear frequently is the idea of having the reservoir, the insurance policy, Lake Casitas, that backs the system up during the dry periods, is that the fear is that if it was a freeway and you add a lane to the freeway and then you just have more cars on the freeway, you end up back where you started. I think that's something that during these public discussions of how that could be prevented. But thank you very much for the information.
Thank you.
Good work. I
Thank you.
appreciate all your effort. Okay. I guess I need to check with the clerk on the number of cards now. I think your original count is probably substantially changed. Is that correct? Okay, we have a lot of cards, both for the public comment on 2 or 3 of the items on the agenda. So we're going to ask everybody to keep their remarks to 2 minutes or very close to that if possible, so that we can complete the agenda at a reasonable hour. So are these the public comment? What happened to the card that was up here? Okay.
So we still have some
Okay, the Bill Miley, you're up.
to approve the consent calendar.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Bill Miley, and I've lived here a long time. I want to talk about parking downtown. I had a little poem, but I won't read it because I need the extra minute. But it was about going downtown on Saturday, looking for a parking place because you had a reservation at a restaurant. You couldn't find a parking place, so you went over to the skate park, which has been used to giving variances for parking, and that was full too. So what did we do? We decided we would go to Taco Bell because they have a lot of space. Okay. With recent parking variances given to reduce or eliminate on-site parking for new construction and remodels, and the skate park parking provided instead, that site is probably greatly overbooked. It has about 32 spaces total with 2 handicap, 2 charging. Historically, the last parking study was done in 1992 and 2006, I believe. I urge your council to seriously consider ordering an updated or new parking study. Also, since more requests for parking variances may be requested, I suggest the council seriously consider adopting a moratorium on granting parking variances and on reducing or eliminating in lieu parking fees until the study is complete. In summary, we need a new parking study. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Next, Steve Quillisi and Severa Lara on deck.
Thank you, sir. Steve Quillisi, West Eucalyptus Street in the city. I spoke last meeting about frustration with Libby Bowl fee waivers, and I just wanted to publicly recognize Amber Young. She called me back made sure that I got all the paperwork we need. She did say that since the deadline for 2018 events was last October, that we're too late for this year, but we will be in the hunt come October this year. And I wanted to thank her publicly for coming up with what we needed to know about so that we can try to take our place among the other worthwhile events that are looking for fee waivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Severo and Jerry down on deck.
Mayor Johnston, City Council members, staff, Chief, good to see you. I'm going to keep it short. First of all, I'm wearing the hat for right now I'm the president of the Ojai Valley Green Coalition Board, and I want to extend my thank you and gratitude to Tim Nafzinger, because as a board, I want to say this, as a whole board, we were unanimously impressed by what he provided as an interim time for the Green Coalition. Not only did he make his deliverables that we set as a board, but he exceeded our expectation. And he has a bright future, in my opinion. He's only 35, 36. And to see everything that he did is just, it blew our socks off, just to say.
He's a
the
year older
least.
than you.
You have a bright future too,
You have it.
Severo.
Well, I just want to express my gratitude. Also want to introduce the council, our new executive director, who we, in the interview process, also were just impressed in terms, just not his talents, his accomplishments, his experience, but what he's really going to be able to provide this board, a strong leadership position that we're truly looking forward. Todd Kalsart, and so we're excited, and I just wanted to introduce him to the council and have an opportunity for you to meet him.
Yes, and I would just say I'm really, really excited to be able to work with this organization, and I'm very excited to be able to have the opportunity to work with the council and offer my expertise and my assistance and advice in the issues that you're trying to resolve as a community.
Okay.
Welcome.
Welcome, Todd.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, Jerry, you're up, and is it Doug Kern? Am I reading that correctly? You're on deck. There's a chair down front if you want to come down early.
I'm Jerry Dunn, a city resident, and I'm here to ask why the ban on short-term rentals isn't being enforced. The council banned short-term rentals starting on June 1st, 2016. Technically, I believe you decided STRs were a zoning violation, and you pledged to enforce against this. The council also passed an ordinance that banned advertising for rental stays shorter than 30 days. With these actions, you recognize that STRs destroy the character of our neighborhoods. You recognize that STRs gobble up housing that could have been rented long-term to firefighters, teachers, and others who contribute to the community. And you recognize that STRs cram too many tourists into our 4x4 square mile town. So if STRs are bad for Ojai, as you have voted they are, the obvious question is, why have you failed to put teeth into the ban? There are at least 24 STRs are known to operate inside the city limits. No doubt there are many more going under the radar. Regrettably, the city's only effort at enforcement is against advertising, listings on sites like VRBO and Airbnb. But the operators of illegal STRs even sneak past this. They make a mockery of Ojai's regulations by stating 30 days only in the ads and still renting by the night. So it's the city's job to ferret out these violators, and it's been almost 2 years, and they're still operating with impunity. Is it a lack of will, the backbone to enforce the rules? Is it a lack of funds to hire investigators and enforcement officers? Well, if that's it, here's an idea. In recent years, tourists paid an extra charge on their hotel bills to fund the OTID, the Tourist Improvement District. That died, but we learned something useful. Hotel guests don't object to a small added fee, probably don't even notice. So why not reinstate a fee, maybe just 0.5%, that would go directly to the city for one purpose only, to hire STR investigators and enforcement officers. You'd instantly have a budget for their salaries, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now you're considering approval of little houses on wheels, and it has to be obvious that some of those parked in backyards will soon become short-term rentals. I don't think you should even discuss them until the ban is being effectively enforced. So I urge you to find the will and the funding to do what was promised, shut down illegal short-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank
Can I
you.
ask
Jim.
a question of Jerry, please? Jerry, have you reported any?
I have not reported any. I'm not policing. That's the city's job.
Okay, because it's my understanding that when they're reported, the city investigates.
That could,
Yeah,
that's
I'm
the
just-
most
I'm just-
passive policy I've ever heard.
Okay, well, but sometimes that's what's necessary, but we can't discuss it now. But I just was curious if you had made a report. Thank you.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. Doug, with Andy Gilman on deck.
Good evening, Mayor Johnston and city staff, council members. I'm here this evening to really say thank you. We, Ojai residents, we had a really terrible holiday season, and it was tough on all of us. So I just really want to say thank you to you guys for your due diligence and just staying and working with everybody here. And different agenda items come up, and you guys seem to handle it. And you know, the small, tiny homes, all that, it's all part of this effect that has happened since the holiday season. So I just really want to say thank you guys for all this. I'm still in the medicinal greens cannabis company that I work with. And if it comes up and you guys are interested in having more opportunity for other companies, please don't hesitate, and you'll see me around these meetings. But I just want to say thank you. You know, you guys do a good job. All right,
Okay, thank you, Doug.
Hmm?
Andy, you're up, and Tim, you're next. With your bright future ahead of you.
Thanks for your time. You probably know, some of you for sure, April 15th, we're going to have an Ojai Chautauqua panel on water, which you just heard about, and Richard is going to be the moderator. Bill is on the panel. It's ohaichat.org. We have, I think, everybody represented, and my hope is that we will get to look at all those issues in detail. There'll be a packet on every chair with, you know, all the casitas data, rainfall, everything that was similar to the tourism panel. And what we've done so far is we've tried to set this in motion to have a series of Ojai-focused events in addition to the national-focused ones. And my hope is that the Ojai-focused events can all be free. So in this case, the Chamber of Commerce, Oak Grove School, and some private donors have paid for the cost of this event so that it can be free. And I'm hoping, what I would love to say on April 15th, I think you'll have one more meeting before then, and also the city helped let this be free. So the chamber and the other donors donated $1,000. So I would ask you to consider that at your next meeting, to think of that. And I would include you on every single bit of publicity from then on. And I hope it's a sign of goodwill that our intention is to show all the sides in the best possible way. And just to let you know about the popularity, I have 354 seats in Matilaha, and I have 335 RSVPs. So I'm expecting it to be sold out this week, and we're going to live stream it as a result, in addition to it being posted. So I think this is just the beginning of a wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you, and timely.
Andy? Okay, Tim, you're up, and Connor Jones on deck.
Hi, as Severo said, I'm finishing up in my role as interim director this week with the Green Coalition, but I'm going to be continuing until April 21st, helping to coordinate Earth Day, which Susa Francina is very involved in. I just want to share with the community a little bit of the highlights of that event as we're putting it together. It's going to, for the first time, it's going to be happening here in Libby Park, thanks to working with the city on that, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. on April 21st. Some of the speakers are Julie Tumamite, Mayor Johnson. We're looking forward to having you speak there. Councilwoman Francina, Kelly Pascoe, Josh Tickell, Connor Jones, and the Oak Grove Kids Choir. Some of the activities we're looking forward to are Birds from the Raptor Center. Ray Serino is going to have some activities with kids that will help them explore alternative building, like hands-on Adobe creation, thanks to Susa's connection there. We're going to have some dancing, yoga, and lots of kids' activities, including face painting and flag creation. We're also going to have a waste stream station where people can actually do hands-on, see where the compost from the event goes, where the trash goes, and the recycling. So check out OhioEarthDay.org and the Green Coalition page. Thank you.
Thank you. Connor?
Hello. It's good to be back. It's been a little while. I wanted to give a little update on this last rain event and how it pertains to a potential watershed approach to water security. From the data that the county supplied from the Ventura watershed, the Ventura River shed about 500 cubic feet per second of water into the ocean in the peak of that storm on March 21st, right? So what that looks like is about 3,740 gallons per second. So then I looked at the 58-year average for this time of year, and it was about 700 gallons per second, right? So if you do the math on that, in a 24-hour period, that's about 60 million gallons of water that leaves our watershed. So that's about 180 acre feet of water. Right, so in these surge events that we get in the winter season, there's a really significant opportunity for storage, and I really don't think we have a crisis of water scarcity. I think we have a crisis of regional management. And I think storage and better infiltration practices throughout the basin is the way forward. So thank you. That's really all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Connor. Okay, that's all the cards I have under public comment. When we were approving the agenda, Bill, you had mentioned before the meeting that you'd like to pull, was it item G?
Yes, sir.
You still want to do that?
Yes, I do.
If there's no objection to the council?
I'd like to pull item H, if I could, just for a brief comment.
Okay. Okay, Bill, item G?
Yes, I believe that 1 year is too long for staff to come back with an evaluation for additional charge point electric vehicle charging stations. So I would move to approve item G, changing 1 year to 4 months.
I would second that.
Okay. Is there any objection to giving that direction to the council? Okay, so ordered. Randy, you had a...
I just had, this is the annual report on residential growth management plan, and I asked for some supplemental information on it, and I received, this report was given November 28th in 2000, and it was given again in October 28th in 2003, and then I have the last date given, I believe, is August 24th, 2010. And again, I just keep getting lost in the word annual versus semi-annual versus when we get to it. So I just want to say, first of all, Steve, thank you for bringing it up and actually getting on schedule. I'm just hoping that if it's annual, that we receive this report on an annual basis, which is yearly, not every 5 years or when we feel we need to provide it. So that's all I wanted to say on it is, I appreciate it, but I think it could be more timely.
Any other comment on that item? If not, okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any objection? If not, so ordered. Okay, let's go to subject number, or discussion item number 2. And we still have a batch of cards, so we'll take the staff report first, and we will continue to have the 2-minute limit. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
City Manager.
Luke Connolly, our Community Development Director, will be making the report. Mr. Connolly.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This report's going to be pretty brief. As you know, I haven't been here very long, but I did have a chance to get into this issue a little bit, and I think just some of the main issues to highlight tonight is while you have an ordinance before you, the purpose of this really is to consider and discuss the ordinance, which I believe the intent was to take back at a future date to the Planning Commission to then have the ordinance returned for your adoption. So just want to be clear on that really the intent is to get additional input and clarity on the issues related to the tiny houses. And I think the second thing to note, as the staff report makes clear, is that really where we're talking about tiny houses, this is really a subset of accessory dwelling units. So while this is an ordinance, it falls under that subset, and tiny houses would also be then subject to the regulations you have currently on accessory dwelling units. So this isn't an exception to that, it's in addition to that. I think, as you know as well, the ordinance on which this is modeled comes from the city of Fresno. So while there's been a lot of discussion with different public agencies about this issue, There have not been, to my knowledge, a lot of ordinances or policies put on the books related to the regulation of tiny houses. So this ordinance is modeled on that, not identical to it, which I think is trying to account for differences between Fresno, which is much more urban, a lot more small lots in the city, and the city of Ojai. And I think, as I said, again, this is really focusing on a new type of accessory dwelling unit. So it's kind of complementing the conventional units you have throughout the city, but acknowledging also the differences. Certainly you've got mobility and typically a smaller size associated with these. They may be prefabricated or constructed elsewhere. So those are key differences, but the intent is, again, to have them operate in conjunction with your more conventional stick-built accessory dwelling units. Don't really have a lot else to add. I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of questions on this, but that just sort of lays out the framework for the discussion tonight. So be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Luke. Is there anything from the, Steve?
One thing, yeah, I did want to point out that there was a typo in the draft.
And I've got the section for you. Section 4, capital I, lowercase I believe that is page 2-9, where the sentence says, if the movable tiny house does have, it should say does not have its wheels removed. So that was pointed out to us, and the word not should be in there. The intent is in the case if the wheels were not removed. It's essentially saying, should you retain the wheels, the unit would still need to look like and operate as a more permanent structure. The wheels couldn't be visible and it would have to be sitting at grade. So that was the one staff correction.
Yeah. Would you give us that reference again?
Right here.
Is on page
Yeah,
2-9?
page 2-9, yeah.
This is subsection I under H?
Yeah, I,
I.
and then subsection I, the first sentence.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Luke.
I have a
Yeah, I have
question. Yeah. It was not my understanding that this had to go back to the planning commission. Maybe, we've had discussions, it's been to the planning commission at least twice, if not 3 times. So what would be the reason for it having to go back? I mean, we don't know, in my mind, we don't know yet whether it has to go back, because I don't know how the discussion will go. But are you saying that is a given, or depends on the discussion tonight?
I believe it was the intent. The city attorney may be to elaborate a little more than I can.
Mayor and council, yeah. So if the council moves the item forward, of course, then the matter must return to the planning commission for a public hearing, as this is a proposed zoning ordinance amendment and would be structured within the zoning ordinance. If recommended for adoption by the planning commission, it would then come to this, or if recommended not adoption, either way, it would come to the city council for a public hearing and then could be introduced and adopted in those 2 meetings.
Okay, so it's mandatory.
And that's under the government code, because it's within the zoning code.
It's government code.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That's what I needed to know.
Randy, you have a question?
I just had a quick comment. During the studying of this issue, I came across the government's guide to tiny house regulations. I think it was a company called Viewpoint. But have you heard of them?
I have not heard of
They've
them.
got a 14-page assessment of tiny homes in the United States. And they do cover Fresno. In fact, I even pulled up Fresno's ordinance. But I just would recommend, I'm going to pass it on to the city manager at the end of the discussion, but I would recommend that we look at it and also that we provide a copy of it to the planning commission when it goes back for review. It just provides a lot of information as to how other communities have gone through this process and what these communities have adopted in their ordinances, which I think would be beneficial to us in this discussion. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Randy.
Mayor John, I have a question of staff.
Bill?
Just to be clear, by being categorized as an accessory dwelling unit, that means that a permit for this kind of accessory dwelling unit would preclude another permit on the same parcel for an accessory dwelling unit. So it's self-limiting in that respect, in terms of the same limit that would be on any accessory dwelling unit would also apply to any permits for tiny homes on wheels. Is that correct?
Correct. If a homeowner were to opt to have a tiny house as an accessory dwelling unit, that would be the accessory unit they could have. They could not have another.
Not build another one?
Correct.
A foundation built, right? Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Steve, is there something you wanted to say?
I'd like the city attorney to provide a little further clarification on if there was a guest house on the property.
Yeah, so happy to speak to that. Under the ADU ordinance, of which tiny houses, if approved under this approach, would be a species of ADU, then if you could not have both a tiny house, which is a detached ADU, and a guest house, which would be a habitable structure without a kitchen but with more than a half bath.
Right.
However, you could have a tiny house and a accessory structure, meaning habitable structure with a half bath or less.
Right.
The, of course, caveat is that the council is considering writing the tiny house rules, so you could vary that if you wished, but that would be the present structure.
Okay. That's, Mr. Mayor, that's one of the things I wanted to point out, that while on its face, the way it's written, it says you can't have, the tiny home can't be adjunct to an ADU. That doesn't mean we can't change that.
Right. Right, correct.
If we decide we want it to be adjunct to an ADU,
It could be.
we could say it is.
Right.
Okay.
I just want, as written, that's all.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay, we'll go to the public comment or comments from the public. And Wendy Hilger. Is Wendy out there? No, there Wendy is. And Rosalie Zabia is on deck.
Thank you. The primary goal of this ordinance is to treat tiny houses on wheels as an alternative type of accessory dwelling unit. There are two types of tiny houses. One is a tiny house on a foundation, legally considered an accessory dwelling unit. The other is a tiny house on wheels built on a vehicle chassis, licensed by the DMV and legally considered a trailer or a recreational vehicle. Almost all states prohibit RVs as full-time residences in zones other than RV parks. Unless Ojai is interested in an RV park, let's discard this ordinance and turn the discussion and focus to small permanent homes on foundations. This should not be happening. We should not have to be here to discuss it again. Just 2 weeks ago, 3 council members enabled the builder of movable tiny houses and the Ojai Valley Green Coalition to apply for a Fannie Mae grant to build a movable tiny house village behind City Hall in the center of Ojai. This action was not advertised. It did not have citizen support or any existing ordinance in place concerning tiny houses on wheels. Yet with little information, no answers from the advocates, and I think with no real understanding of the consequences of this vote, 3 council members moved this ahead in less than a day, and tonight we are being pushed to add insult to injury. You are acting like the citizens of Ojai agree that we are anxious to have movable little houses welcome to every single family yard available throughout the city whenever possible. We are being told once again that Ojai is using Fresno's ordinance as a starting point for ours, adapting it to our community. What would that fit look like? Ojai already has a state-mandated ADU ordinance, which allows homes or on foundations from 220 square feet to 1,200 square feet to be built in suitable yards. Let us have time to see how our existing ordinance works before adding another one which has been hastily written and is being pushed along at warp speed. Many publications advocating the introduction of tiny houses on wheels into communities have one common thread. After discussing the movement and describing their efforts, whether or not rules exist, they say, don't worry, any rules are only enforced if your tiny house on wheels is reported or complained about. Nothing is enforced proactively. Great. The citizens of Ojai did not ask for this ordinance, and they have not rallied to have tiny houses on wheels become a part of our residential neighborhoods. To move this ordinance forward would pose a life-changing event for our community. If it does move forward, I believe that only Ojai citizens should be heard on this issue. They are the only ones that will be affected. Others
Okay.
must present their case to the county. Think about why you are here. You only represent Ojai citizens. Don't continue to waste our time and spend our money in pursuit of this advertising scheme.
Okay.
I know firsthand that whoever controls the process controls the outcome, and I feel as if we're being led down someone else's garden path. Please do not move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Mayor Johnston, I'd like to make one correction of facts.
Yes.
This city council did not authorize placement nor construction of anything on city land in that vote to authorize an application, support of an application for a grant, period.
Okay, but it did say that we were keenly interested in the letter that was adopted on
In
a 3-2
evaluations,
vote.
but it did not authorize construction nor placement. That's not true.
Okay. Okay, Rosalie.
Hi, I'm Rosalie Zabilla. Many of you know me from my time on the Planning Commission. After spending 4 years on the Planning Commission, I've heard all the presentations, I've heard the advocates, and I've heard the detractors. And I am convinced that allowing tiny homes on wheels to function as ADUs is not a path to affordability, but instead it only invites a whole bunch of nasty impacts for those of us who own and rent in the city. Time after time, I heard advocates say the following: I come from such and such a place, and I want to be able to drive my tiny home to Ojai and live there. They have said, we are a mobile community, we want to come and go, and hey, one guy even said, hey, if Ojai runs out of water, we'll just go to Oregon. Is that what we want? This stuff is all on tape. The biggest problems for tiny homeowners is they have no place to put their tiny homes. So now we are essentially putting out the welcome mat to people from all over the country, people who can afford a tiny home on wheel and the truck to pull it, to come and hang in Ojai. And somehow that's solving the affordability problem? Should we just become Snowbird Central? Maybe you imagine everyone is going to run out and buy a tiny home and rent it out cheaply. Well, maybe they will if they don't have to do any of the costly health and safety things that the rest of us feel is important. No foundation? Who cares? Until there's a flood or a debris flow. No proper connections for sanitation, water, electricity? Who cares until the flies start to gather or someone gets sick or hurt? I've seen this a billion times in real estate. Trailers out there in the field, it's just a free-for-all. You say you'll make all kind of rules to prevent people from not doing the health and safety, but I have seen how code enforcement works. The list grows every week, and the same violators are there month after month after month. We simply don't have the resources to police something that doesn't move, much less something that does. There is a great silent majority out there of homeowners and renters. If you ask them, do you think it's okay for cute trailers to suddenly be here overnight, for you to suddenly have new neighbors that may stay or may just trade places with someone else when the spirit moves them? I guarantee you no one wants that kind of instability in our community. We want people who are rooted, who give back, who are investing in the well-being of Ojai. If you want a tiny home to be an ADU, put it on a foundation. And if you are really interested in affordable housing, then please quit wasting our tax dollars on staff and commission time with these proposals. Get to work on something that makes real sense, not something that just sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Squire with Xavier, is it Cabarga? On deck.
I've lived in Ojai for 10 years. I started out with affordable housing. Let me say it's not affordable anymore. I'm looking at having to move out of state. I'm at retirement age and I can't retire. I want options and choices, and tiny houses allow the vision or the thought that I could have a permanent structure. Since I can't afford, even if it's on wheels, it can be permanent. It's hooked up and I can have a living place in the city of Ojai where I've lived instead of having to leave the state. So many of these objections are just simply not true. You can have tiny homes on foundations or wheels, but they're not easily transient, and they're not something where people want to come here and leave. People want to be here and have choices. We don't have choices anymore in rentals. I have neighbors, 81-year-olds, and others who are going to have to leave Ojai. They've been here 16, 20 years because they can't afford the rents anymore. It just keeps escalating and escalating and escalating, and there's no end in sight. And you're losing a great, these are people who love Ojai. We've been here for a while. We've contributed to the city. And we need choices and options, and what this ordinance can do is give us that. It's not everything, it's part of it. It's part of it. And I really ask you to consider that people in Ojai really do want choices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Xavier?
Well, what I want to say is certainly relevant now. I want to address the concerns about transients that has come up so often in this discussion of tiny houses. To me, the word seems synonymous with vagrants and bums. And I think many people worry that if affordable housing, especially tiny houses, become legal here, Ojai will become like the in-out door at a restaurant with a constant stream of strangers passing through. We might even consider our tourists and those who visit for a month or more as transients.
My personal observation over the 11 years I've lived here is that these tend to be people who are seeking community and checking out Ojai as a possible place to put down roots. I see young couples, many with kids, young and old visitors wondering if Ojai is a good fit for them, as opposed to just passing through. When I see the unfamiliar faces wandering around, I just don't see that worst case scenario of a rowdy party crowd here to trash the town and then just split. I've been fascinated with tiny houses for 4 years. I believe from all the research and that I've been doing that typical tiny house owners don't want to travel the country but hope to find a beautiful location to settle down. The fact that they've got wheels is more about the ease of building on a strong, ready-made trailer platform. And since tiny houses are not yet legal, you need to have the possibility to move the house if forced to. And it's not easy to move a 10,000 or 14,000 pound house. You know, you need it to rent a commercial vehicle or have a huge truck. Tiny people are not transients, itinerants, or bums. For one thing, they've maybe spent $20,000 to upwards of $100,000 at times to build their dream houses. They're more like a new breed of pioneers building their own affordable homesteads in a land that has become increasingly unaffordable. I had a long-time dream of designing and building a house here, but I happen to lack $1 million. So for me, a tiny house would be the perfect solution. I believe I'm typical of many prospective tiny house people who want to live more affordable, simpler lives and in beautiful communities in which we want to become involved. During my years here in Ojai, I've seen people come and go. Ojai seems to attract certain types of people, and if they're not a good fit, I've always had the feeling that Ojai rejects them. So I sincerely believe that allowing ADUs and tiny houses will enhance this town and not cause an influx of undesirable transients or change what we love about Ojai. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Okay, get it out of your system. Happy fingers are better than applause, and we'll get through the meeting a little faster, okay? I'm glad for everyone's enthusiasm on both sides of the issue. Tara Saylor, you're up with Bill Miley on deck.
Hello, Tara Saylor, and I am an Ojai resident, born and raised, basically. Moved here when I was 5 months old. I've been a resident for probably 25 to 27 years of my 32 years of existing. So I left for college, and I missed Ojai so much. And I think I said this 2 years ago when this topic came up, was I'm very impressed on how Ojai has created a space for young folks to exist. Now, fast forward 2 more years, rental economy is getting a little difficult, very difficult. So what's our options? Diversify, add options, don't subtract options. I just want to say, mainly, thank you for all the efforts that's gone into these ordinances. Everybody is being considered, and I think that's really important. One thing I love about Ojai is the diversity, is the pros and cons list, and we look at each side very thoroughly, and I think that's so important. And transitory nature, I just want to say, the people that I know, lots of them sitting here, are not looking to leave Ojai, but they can't afford property. There's so many people in Ojai that I know that I may or may not have pitched a tent on for a year because I could not afford to live here yet, that would like to set up a possibility to have a movable home. I could potentially own a movable home, but I can't afford land. I'm an educator. I love educating the kids, and I want to be able to do that. I really don't see cost of my salary going up, so my options in other departments need to change. Thanks.
Thank you, Tara. Bill Miley with, is it Charletta on deck?
Carlita.
Carlita, oh yeah, I should have done that from before. Carlita, you're on deck. And
For the record, my time is, okay. For the record, my name is Bill Miley. I want to suggest a few add-ons to the tiny house draft ordinance. But first, I need to tell you how I feel. I still believe that tiny houses don't belong in the city of Ojai. But since there is a draft ordinance before you, I've read it over, and what I understand is I'm going to tell you what I think should be added. I have examined the Fresno City Tiny House Ordinance as well as considering tiny house impact here in residential zones. I suggest the following 4 additions. 1, a tiny house must be connected to a water and sewer utility hookup No compost toilets, and you can't get water from the hose. 2, all tiny houses are to be located behind the primary house, out of sight from the street, except on corner lots. Neighborhood visuals shall retain the current before tiny house placement of a visual environment before the house. No trailer living shall be visible. 3, tiny houses shall be placed on either a concrete pad or a graded gravel pad, both requiring a grading permit, and they should be skirted. 4, a covenant requirement asserting the property owner will be living on the property is necessary. All of the above are in the Fresno City Ordinance. I believe they are important and should be in the second draft. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Carlita, with Diane McCourtney on deck.
I'm Charlita Erb, and I'm a psychotherapist in Ojai as well as Ventura. I just wanted to bring a report of a petition that we circulated, one online and one in person, and we got a total of 121 Ojai people signing the petition that reads the following. In view of the current affordable housing crisis affecting Ojai, we, the undersigned, hereby state our support of efforts to codify tiny houses on wheels and other small accessory dwelling units within the city of Ojai and the county of Ventura as legal dwelling units. We also support ongoing efforts by the Ojai City Council and City Planning Commission to identify and develop private land parcels and/or city-owned properties suitable for the creation of a tiny house village or villages. I'd add that there were a handful of extra people from within the Ojai Valley that signed on as well. And the world is watching. So on the online petition and everything added up in total, there were 590 people that signed the petition. So of course those are people from abroad, but the world is watching. Thank you.
Okay. Diane McCourtney is up with Vina Listado on deck.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Diane McCourtney from 204 Fox Street. I'm not going to say too many words. I brought you a little something. There's so many misconceptions that I wanted to add some reality in terms of some photographs. I brought you some pictures to look at that show, number one, how beautiful. Okay, I'll give them to you now. 3 pictures of how beautiful and darling tiny houses can be. There's 2 pictures of some beautiful tiny house villages, which can be run like an HOA, so that eliminates a lot of the objections. And they're also very eco-friendly. That's part of what tiny house culture is about. And then there's a couple of pictures that show you how very, very, very difficult it is to move. So transient really is not a valid issue because, as it has been said before, it takes a huge truck to move them. You can't just bounce around. You're stuck. You're connected to the sewers and the water and all of that. So I think that most people that have tiny houses want to plant them. If you can think of it that way, it's more of a realistic view. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Vina? You're up with Elaine. Elaine. You know who you are out there. You're next up.
Good evening, City Council members and City staff. First, I would like to thank the City staff for doing such a fine job on the proposed ADU ordinance to include movable tiny homes. It is very solid and written, very well written, and it addresses many of the concerns regarding transiency, safety, and design to make sure they are distinct from RVs and mobile homes. I am very particular about the aesthetic quality of these tiny homes, and I would only support design with the highest quality for Ojai. I would also like to say that tiny homes on wheels or movable tiny homes are only one solution to affordable housing. It is not a panacea, and I truly believe we should explore other options, such as tiny houses on foundations and other alternative housing solutions. On the Fannie Mae Grant Award application, we proposed foundation-based tiny homes with expedited permitting processing and prefabricated modular construction. We also proposed fire-resistant building methods for construction. At this critical time of need, I ask you to support the proposed ADU ordinance as one solution. If this is passed, this will serve as a pathway for other cities to follow who are also plagued with the housing crisis. Ojai can be an exemplary example and a beacon of light for innovation and ingenuity. I know it will make a huge difference in so many people's lives. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Vina. Okay, Elaine, you are up, and Kim and Nick, is this Tugdarian? You're on deck.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Elaine Reeser, and I am here as a 25-year Mercer Avenue homeowner and recently retired teacher from Topa Topa School. Upon retirement and thankfully seeing both my children living on their own, I found myself spending much of my time and resources maintaining the family home and swimming pool. As lovely as it was, I wanted to do more with my retirement. I noticed with sadness that many people, my 2 college-educated children included, were being priced out of the valley due to lack of affordable housing. After a year plus of soul searching, I made the decision to downsize to less house and hopefully more land. That would free up time and resources for volunteering, pursuing artistic endeavors, and continued travels to Central America and beyond. Time to let another young family enjoy backyard swimming pool fun, stunning mountain views, and morning walks to wonderful Topa Topa School. Tiny houses, tiny homes, and tiny living came to be tops on my list of brainstorming more creative, sustainable housing options that also speak to the need for affordable housing here in Ojai. My original idea was to purchase land and create a tiny home village as an intentional community with an environmentally oriented theme. Tiny home village residents would share a vehicle for travel outside the valley and volunteer in a learning project where school children could come and participate in building, growing, and responsible resource use. Of course, the sale of an average single-family residence here in Ojai would not generate funds to buy, let alone develop land for such a project. But as a beginning, I could, with passage of tonight's proposed ADU ordinance, find affordable land to build a tiny home on foundation and legally rent space for a tiny home on wheels. It is a step in the right direction to creating affordable housing solutions. It would also let me, as I age, find a place for myself in a tiny home and have my children and grandchildren close by in maybe a larger tiny home. My goals for speaking tonight are to encourage passage of the proposed ADU ordinance, as well as to begin to change the public perception of tiny home dwellers. And just for fun, I made these. I am not a transient. I've been here. I'm a desirable Ojai resident, at least I think that I am, and I'd love to live in a tiny home in Ojai.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Right.
for listening and being a part of the community devoted to protecting and nurturing our lovely, magical Ojai.
Thank you, Diane. Kim, very good. Thank you. Okay, Kim and Nick with McKinley Barnes on deck.
I'm Kim, and I basically have been in Ojai since I was 6 months old. I'm 58. I have watched the demise of Ojai. We're overtaxing our resources. The lake is low. The traffic is horrible. I've been here since there was one stoplight. Now, you people say you're here and you know about Ojai. Every house with that comes 1 or 2 cars, 1 or 2 people, more trash, a storage shed because the average person collects stuff.
Excuse me, could you address us?
Sorry, the average
That's
person
okay,
collects stuff. I've never
Thank-
been to one of
That's
these
all- but
before.
but you need to address us,
Okay,
not.
I'll take
Okay.
care of it.
I wasn't
Okay.
aware of that.
Thank
Okay,
you.
That's fine.
But the average person collects stuff. That means storage sheds. That means trash. That means toys. You're talking about little homes where the upstairs you have to crawl from one room to the next. I've been in them. There is little or no storage. So how is this supposed to be a sustainable solution? Where is all this stuff going to go? Where are those vehicles going to go? Is there going to have to be parking permits on all our streets or parking meters? Where is it that that is a sustainable idea? when we are already overpopulated. Whatever happened to the building moratorium they put in Ojai years ago? It's gone. Nobody's thinking of how they're impacting the valley. They're thinking of adding money to their wallet. They're thinking of greed.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add, I think there's, way too many cars going up to 33 now, and this is just going to make it worse. I don't live in Beverly Hills because I can't afford to live there. If you can't afford to live in Ojai, go somewhere else, is my opinion. We're going to overpopulate this town, and it's getting worse. It makes me almost want to leave. I'll put a couple of tiny houses in my backyard and go live somewhere else and collect.
Okay, thank you. McKinley Barnes, you are up.
Hello.
And Tim Bright
Am I-
Future Knopfsiger, you're on deck.
So I want to speak about the essence of Ojai, and we all know that what draws people to Ojai is that it's a spiritual community and a creative community full of artists. That's what brings money into our town. Our town does not survive of its own residents. It does not. And I think what's important is those people who are spiritual, creative types generally are not making a lot of money, and they're having a hard time living here. So providing an option for the real lifeblood of this town to continue to thrive is very important. Those people also, if they're not spending so much on a living here, could open small businesses. That can also bring income into the city and present more of that Ojai that is Ojai that draws people from all over the world, really, but certainly from LA. The tiny homes that I've seen are beautifully created by artists. They will enhance the city. I think it's also important to, in terms of traffic, people who live in Ojai, there are people coming in and out of Ojai for work, and if they can live in Ojai and work in Ojai, they're not driving up and down the 33. They're riding their bike to their work. They're walking to their work, and that helps everybody. And then more cars can come in from LA and leave their money here. And the other thing is there are young families that can't afford to live here and their children can't go to school here. And I remember giving my tax money back to a school here in town when they couldn't keep their doors open a few years ago. And we're going down that path because people with young children can't live here. And I know that a lot of people who are interested in tiny homes have kids and are looking at them to live in with their children. Surprisingly enough, that's the truth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim, you're up with Severo. You're on deck. Severo's still here. I don't see him.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson and Council. One of the issues I want to speak to that's been raised is community support and energy around this. So I've been fortunate enough to be part of facilitating the group called the Ojai Valley Restoration and Resilience Council, which is a project of the Green Coalition that's been meeting over the last couple months. And that group is really looking at questions in the wake of the fires. How do we provide adequate housing? How do we rethink the way we can relate together as a community and come together? And I think, as a number of people have said, tiny houses are part of a wider conversation, and we really appreciated Vino Lustado coming to the last Restoration and Resilience Council on March 10 and sharing about that, because I have seen a lot of community support, anywhere from 20 to 50 people coming out to these meetings on Saturdays, and it's been really inspiring, and I see this movement flowing out of that and continuing that positive energy, so thank you.
Okay, Severo, you're up, and Philip Termiti?
Mayor Johnson, staff, chief, and I want to acknowledge our fire chief that's over there in the audience. First of all, there's two members that had to leave from Ojai that were in support of tiny homes. I just want to express his name was Alex and her name was Emmy DeYoung. So I just want that on public record. They couldn't stay. But I am here in support to start getting this process going through the right commissions and start vetting the requirements. I'm born and raised here in Ojai, and I want to share that I have a lot of friends that grew up here in Ojai that cannot afford to live, because there's so many limited homes here, and we don't actually build. Actually, a couple years ago or last year, I read the police statistics about the population here in the city limits, and over a 10-year span from 2005 to 2015, there's only an increase of 50 residents in the city of Ojai. To me, that's a housing issue. Tiny homes does not provide the solution for affordable housing. I want to get that clear. It does not, but it is an option, and we have to start thinking outside the box. This is I'm not looking to buy a tiny home. It's not something that I want to venture into, but I do support other residents that want an opportunity to live in the city of Ojai. And it's also eco-friendly. It's not low affordability, but it's a different type of affordability. And I would love to hear you guys give specific direction tonight, if you're not ready for the ordinance, to make it clear to the Planning Commission, and they numbered a good amount of concerns that they had in your report, clarify which ones they would like to proceed with if you guys in your discussion are not able to decide. I mean, the fine print limits this as a dwelling. So, I mean, there's options in there. I mean, I know it's difficult for the community to see how this would limit tiny home movement, but there is. But I'm just asking for the opportunity to vet in the community and filter through the right process to get community support. Thank you.
Thank you, Sparrow. Philip, are you out there? Come on down.
Good evening, everyone. I am Philip Tremerty, owner of Tiny Homes, Ventura County. You've probably seen a couple of my homes on the side of the road down there in front of Boku. I'm just here advocating for our tiny homes. I commend you guys so much for as far as you've gone so far. It's truly amazing, and especially during this time, it's really hard, and everyone brings up valid points on both sides of how they want them and they don't want them. But I'm here to say, I see these people firsthand, day in and day out, and how they say, I just want to live minimally with my daughter, with my grandson, with my son. I want to live on their property, but I don't want to have a piece of property stuck on the property they're going to be paying for on the rest of their lives. They don't want to pay that. They're like, I know I'm going to be leaving soon. I know I'm only going to be there temporarily. I just want to live in this now. And then they can move this after I'm gone, or they can do whatever they want with it. They don't want it to be fixed to the property. They do not want to pay more money to stay someplace that they love. It's getting ridiculous to live on this place. And I, for one, love it. And I just want to help out anybody and everybody across the board. I want to make people happy. I want to see everybody not fight over this one simple issue. Really. People lost homes. They lost everything. And now they're looking for a reason or a place to live. All right? And I want to give that to them. People come see me, they say, I got one just like that. I want to see how you did that. They're already around. They're already in these places. So please, think hard. Read all the literature that has been put in front of you, because it's very important that something like this can be a part of this amazing community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all the cards I have, so I guess we'll bring it back to council for any discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I want to preface my remarks by saying that I really think that the tiny homes are cute, and I don't have any particular adversity to the tiny homes themselves. But I'm really at a loss in many of the comments by the people that are advocating them. For instance, you're asking that we provide options. Well, I don't see this as an option for a family because I don't think they're suitable for family living. Somebody said that there's 80-year-olds that can't afford to live in Ojai. Well, I defy an 80-year-old to climb up those ladders to get into the lofts where you would sleep in a tiny home. They're not going to be able to do it. And then my question is, there's two types of people that might be interested in the tiny homes. One is a current homeowner that decides that instead of building an accessory dwelling unit, they're going to haul in a tiny home. That's fine. What are they going to do with that tiny home? If it's going to be for affordable housing, then they have to rent it. And who's going to guarantee that they're going to rent it at an affordable rate? No guarantee. The second individuals are the ones that are going to want to buy it themselves, but the tiny home in and of itself doesn't do you any good because you have to have a place to put it. And I don't even know whether our city allows for homes to be put on other people's homes. I don't know whether we allow for land leases for the purposes of dwelling units. I don't know that. Does Mr. Summers know that?
It wouldn't be automatically barred at the moment, but they would have to meet the underlying density requirements or else be a typical ADU. So you could imagine a situation where you have a homeowner owns a house with land in the back, they rent out, they lease space for then a separate owner to do a stick-built new ADU. That would be lawful, but they'd still have to meet the ADU requirement.
Okay, but I'm saying that can somebody put their, without some sort of a lot line adjustment or something, can somebody bring in a mobile home, speaking on wheels, not a mobile home per se, and put it on somebody else's property for the purposes of living in it? This is not an accessory dwelling unit
if it's
owned
not
by
an
the
ADU
property owner.
It could not. The example you described, a mobile home placed on an existing parcel with an existing primary residence, could not be viable under the current code.
So if somebody owned a tiny home and came to me and said, I want to put it on my property, on your property, technically I wouldn't be able to allow that person to do it, would I?
Under the current code.
Under the current code. This would allow.
That's what we're looking at doing.
But under the current code, we couldn't do that.
Under the current code, no.
Okay. And the only time it would be affordable is if I was willing to do it for free. Potentially.
Or at a reduced rate.
Okay. I think that, with all that being said, if somebody I don't really have a problem if somebody wants to utilize a tiny home as a dwelling unit, accessory dwelling unit, and they want to put it on a foundation, and they want to hook it up to utilities. I don't necessarily have a problem with that versus somebody building a brand new accessory dwelling unit. I just don't see it on wheels where, I don't care, it's got to get moved there, so obviously it can get moved off whenever you want it to. But I just don't see how it's gonna work where we're expecting homeowners to buy them, to have them as affordable units, and then the people that want to buy them and own them have to find a place for them to go. I just don't see it.
Mayor Johnson, or go ahead, Susan.
Okay. Well, I'm beginning to wonder if anyone here read the ordinance, because the ordinance addresses all the concerns. It addresses the issue of mobility and transiency. We would require, at minimum, a one-year lease. Someone couldn't, if you had a property and you wanted to rent, say, to a relative, a friend, or someone that you knew, because usually you want to know someone who's living on your property, you could not do that more than more than once a year. Did I make it clear? You can't have a series of transient people. If someone leaves, you couldn't, and we as a council can mandate even a longer period of time. It's like a lease. You're leasing the land. It's not a month-to-month rental, okay? All the safety concerns are addressed in the ordinance, the design, the foundation. All of these are clearly stated. I want to just backtrack for a moment. My exposure to tiny homes began about, I think, 4 years ago when I met Vina. I went to her home, and it was one of the most beautiful houses I've ever seen. It was in the east end of Ojai, had a beautiful deck around it, and it was just so ingenious how she would convert her desk into, for multiple uses, Has excellent storage, beautiful kitchen, bathroom. It was cleaner than many, many of the homes in Ojai that are going for over $2,000 a month. I have here a letter that a friend of mine, she got a rental increase from $1,350. It's going to be double over a period of time. That is for a place in Ojai that used to be considered a shack. Okay, my little humble house. I do all my own expense. I'm probably the only rent. If you're a renter, you're going to see this differently from someone who's a homeowner. But what many people don't understand is that there are quality of tiny homes just like there are quality of houses. Okay, we can craft an ordinance, and it's already in the ordinance that we would have specifications. It could not look like something junky. It would be a home that lasts for decades, just like a normal house does. Okay, the other thing is that I don't know if those of you that are homeowners realize how trapped people are now. Because if you're not willing to pay double rent, there is really no place to go. If you have a cat or a dog, there's absolutely no place to go. This is in response to a desperate situation. If you want diversity in Ojai, if you want to attract the kind of people that Ojai is known for attracting, I'm sure if Beatrice Wood showed up today as a new, in her midlife, I happen to know her. I know how she was quite strapped for cash when she came here. People like her that have made Ojai internationally known as an art community, as a spiritual community, those people cannot they cannot live here. People at the beginning of their life. And tiny houses are a viable option. As other people have pointed out, they're not the answer. But I'm somewhat taken aback by, it's almost like a witch hunt. Like there's these irrational objections, like you're picturing all these people flooding Ojai with their tiny homes. That's not going to happen. You cannot have a tiny home unless you either own property or you have a friend who owns property that's willing to place it. We already some of the speakers don't realize that there's already a state mandate that makes it so that everybody in Ojai can legally have what's called an accessory dwelling unit. The state has mandated this. This is a state mandate. Tiny homes fall, if we accept this ordinance, and I hope that we do, it falls under the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And and that's all I have for right now. I have much more to say, but I'll pause now.
Mayor Johnson, I want to make it clear that the question tonight, according to our parliamentarian over here, is whether or not we refer this to the Planning Commission and how we refer it to the Planning Commission. Apparently that is the limit of the action that we can take tonight. Either we refer it to the Planning Commission and put some direction on that, or not refer it to the Planning Commission. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's the actions. You could also, on the top of the Planning Commission, you could create a council subcommittee to study it.
But so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the issue is whether or not we're going to advance the due process on evaluating this option for ADUs or not. I think that's the question before us. And I want to concur with Councilperson Francina's point. I think this is absolutely critical. And that is that if we are serious about wanting diversity in this community, we need to explore creative options. And this, as a category of accessory dwelling unit, becomes an option, is self-limiting in the sense of being classified within the category of ADU, clearly has a number of people interested in this as an option, and I think it's our job as a council to look at ways of supporting people exploring their options for how to stay here, how to, for example, establish multi-generational living arrangements. And when you couple that with the fact that research after research clearly indicates there are two drivers of housing costs in California. The research is pretty conclusive on this. So cost of land and the cost of regulation. The cost imposed by regulations, permitting, et cetera, and the cost of land. Those are the drivers.
And the scarcity of the supply.
Well, that's because of land costs and regulation.
No, it's also because of boundaries, like we're 4.5 square miles.
That's the land cost.
Right.
Okay, that's what I mean, the land costs. So if we as a council want to address affordable housing, those are the two items that we can that we have. Those are the ways to look at this in terms of what we can do, and in terms of accessory dwelling units, which are, as Councilperson Francita said, are mandated by the state and increasingly so, where we're looking at a situation where if we are going to maintain our discretion at managing the character of this community, we have to find a way to provide more housing units. That's just the way the regulatory mandates from the state are coming to us. That if we don't allow some of these alternatives, we're going to be increasingly other things we may not want are going to be dictated to us, like saying you've got to allow 3-story apartment buildings, which I don't think many of us want, if we can't show that we've done something else. And when you look at all of that together, I just think it's incumbent upon us to pass this on to the Planning Commission with a direction that they favorably look at this for how to make this work within the character of Ojai, and that we put a deadline on it for them to come back to us with their review. I just think that it's important that we take action to provide options. Yes, we have to look at it, but to be careful about how we do this. Well, we can't keep turning down options. And I think this is clearly something that's important. And then I want to make one more comment. The population of Ojai is less, according to the official population figures, than it was in 1999. Hundreds of people less live in this community today than lived in this community, according to the official figures, in 1999-2000. Look it up. Second major fact, we have the highest percentage of commuters in order to work here of any city in Ventura County because of housing. We have a huge percentage of service workers because of the nature of the visitor economy, and most of them commute, and that is a major contributor to our traffic issue, is forcing people to commute to keep a job here. They can't live here. So to say that providing an alternative for people that are commuting to not commute is somehow automatically and inexorably increasing traffic is just not what the analysis tells us. So I think that it's very appropriate for us to refer this to the Planning Commission with a deadline for a report back to Council. I'll make a motion in a second along those lines. That's how I feel about it after we hear from everybody.
So I did watch the Planning Commission meeting. I watched it. It was an hour and a half, in fact, a little longer than that. It was a long meeting. And I did read the ordinance from the city of Fresno, and I did go online and find more information on tiny homes. And everyone's comments right now are absolutely true. They're true to you. You can take a look at any set of numbers and work them to your convenience or to work them to your output. But I believe that you look at things honestly, Bill, and so I'm gonna agree with what you're saying. Paul, I agree with what you're saying. I don't necessarily know how this is gonna help us in our affordability issue. And I don't even know in here how it's gonna address the tax bases, how it's gonna address, the permitting and how I allow someone to develop something on my site when it's my property and it's not yours. There's still a lot of questions that I need answered. I think one of the things that I took out of the planning session was Commissioner Nolan, who's here. She brought up probably 4 or 5 times, and I just went over everyone's head. But she kept saying that we need a matrix. We need to put this on paper, and we really need to look at all of the individual pluses and minuses that these are going to either contribute or not contribute to our community. And that's what I'd be interested in sending back to planning, is an actual thought process onto the who, what, when, why, and how. Get more clarity. Again, there's some vagueness even in the ordinance here when it says, the planning commission held notice, where am I here? It says here something about the director is going to make an evaluation of tiny homes, and my question is, what's the evaluation? What is he evaluating or she evaluating? Is it because they fall under the, the NISL guidelines, or there's some vagueness in here that they're supposed to look this way or be this way? Again, there's just nothing here that creates a standard for what we would like to have in our community. And then getting back into even the transient side of it. If someone has the opportunity to put one of these units on their property, and then that individual decides that, you know what, Ojai just isn't for me, and then they get up and leave, and now that person has a dedicated piece of land that can't be used for anything else for a year, if I'm interpreting this properly. So they'd have to wait for another year to offer someone the opportunity to do that. Is that what we want? It's not clearly defined in anything that we're talking about tonight. So I think we need better definition. I think we need a better understanding of the parameters of these. I don't even think we have a true definition of a tiny home. Is it a tiny home on wheels? Is it a throw? I'd like that clarity. If it's going to be attached to a foundation and we're gonna put a skirt on it, do we want them to put a deck on it? Because with a skirt and a deck, maybe be less chance of someone moving. There's just so many, to me, there's so many questions in this, and I don't have the answers for it. I do know this much. I do know that we have an affordability issue here in this community. And again, that goes back to part of the mayor's discussion and Councilman Wyrick's. It's about land. We just lack land. We're not a building community, we're a maintenance community. Everything that we do here is maintaining what we have because we don't have anything else to build on. When I looked at this the annual growth plan that we received tonight, technically we were placed in a category that we were supposed to grow at 0.05% a year. We're growing at less than 0.02. We're just not growing. There's nothing to grow to. So that's another of the issues regarding affordability. And again, that's something that needs to be looked at. And that's why I was for this grant, because it's going to offer us an opportunity to actually look at these concerns. If we're going to change the makeup of this community, we don't want to do it half-ass. We don't want to make the decision today to go back in 2 or 3 years and change it. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. There is no rush right now other than the rush to get the best answers. And that's where I stand on this. So, Bill, I look forward after the mayor talks to your motion, but I have more questions. The community has more questions. Even the young lady who said that there were 590 people online. There's 7,500 people in this community. We are going to make a decision tonight that impacts this small part of this big community that we call the Ojai Valley. We need to do that smart. We need to do that thoughtful. And we need to do that with a buy-in from our community. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, I'm not going to try to go down the list of all the points that have been made. And like Randy says, is that lot to be said on both sides of this. But I participated in a meeting not that long ago that was called at noon as a special meeting to apply for a grant from Fannie Mae in order to, as the first phase, to have a public process called a charrette. And next thing I know, we've got this on the agenda that looks like it's pretty much baked. If it didn't have to go to the Planning Commission, I suppose those who favor it would do it tonight. I think it's the order of what we're doing is both confusing to the public, and I would agree with Randy that we need a lot more conversation. I don't think anybody disputes the fact that small homes, whether they be movable or not, can be built and can be attractive. That's not the issue. Not for me, but small homes are very difficult to raise families in and to help the school district. So that's one issue. The affordability thing is what disturbs me most, because I had proposed that we have small accessory or second dwelling units in this town on people's property, and the decision was made by the council to have 1,200 square foot maximum, which is a fairly nice size house. So for us to be arguing over getting tiny houses to make them affordable, somebody's got to pay to have them built. You can't really build them in your driveway or in your backyard, despite all the conversations. Somebody has to inspect them. So there's a multitude of issues that have to be addressed. While I didn't support it, I was persuaded that a public process was the right way to go, and if the charrette was one way to do it, which is what the council decided they wanted to do, and support the grant that has been applied for, I think we should let that take its course. I don't see an urgency for this. When I read the letter that we sent in support of the grant, it talked about 1,000 structures being lost, but they weren't lost in the city of Ojai. We are a tiny community and we can't solve everything. I know we get I won't call it the argument, but there are many people say it happened here first and we're innovative, but it can't always happen here first. And a lot of the people, I think, will be disappointed even if something like this were enacted in Ojai, because they will discover that they don't live in Ojai. They live in the valley, and the county of Ventura has not addressed this issue. They didn't even come to the meeting on the Fannie Mae grant. California has what? So far I've heard one city, Fresno, identified, and when I called up there, they said there wasn't much going on, even though they'd approved one project or something that hadn't been built yet, because the general price of housing in Fresno is affordable, unlike Ojai. So it's not a comparison. So I think that this is such a major shift in the way we go about both the growth issue and the way we go about our zoning and the issue of code enforcement, which we have done a pretty poor job of. I don't know whether we lack the will or the resource, but we've got a budget coming up, and tomorrow we have a priority setting exercise to be had, and it seems like these are the kinds of things that should be discussed at that point. So I would make a motion to postpone this until after priorities are set and until after we find out what happened on the Fannie Mae grant, because a charrette would certainly give people an opportunity to sit down and talk this through.
Hi.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it for discussion purposes,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Moved and seconded then. Sousa.
Well, frankly, I think you're making much ado about nothing. Okay, you're talking about a few people putting something very beautiful with someone's either on their own property, and renting it out, or someone purchases a tiny home, and moving it onto their property. I don't know what you're imagining, but I'm imagining the homes tucked the way that you would normally do a second dwelling unit. It's going to be designed to be compatible. I have no idea what everybody that is against this is imagining. Okay, I know older people who live in huge homes, and they would like to simplify their life but stay on their property. They could have their family live in the larger home. This is just one of many ways that we can increase our housing stock.
And there's
That's
nothing,
all it is.
nothing prevents anybody from putting one of these on their property right now, the tiny home or prefab home or a stick-built home. And frankly, as a former home builder, I can tell you that the cost per square foot is probably cheaper to make it permanent on a foundation. Now, that presupposes that we are following the state laws that have been enacted, which waive a lot of the fees and the connections, which has driven the price up. Bill made that point earlier, and it's true, that the impact fees that have been charged, which the state has now preempted, have gone away. You and I had about an hour and a half conversation with the folks about the tiny houses. I think that a lot of them are very cute, very attractive, and be a nice place to live. And they can go on foundations. That's the difference, I guess.
Mr. Mayor, in comments that Councilwoman Francine made, I haven't heard anybody on the dais say that we didn't think that they were attractive or they were cute. I think they're very attractive. I think they're very cute. That doesn't have anything to do with it. The issues I have is it's the mobility of them, and we can't even enforce short-term rentals, no less try to enforce somebody that's going to move a tiny home on and move it off. I mean, we can't, our code enforcement isn't even able to do half the code enforcement that we need to be doing, no less now having to police tiny homes coming in once a year. The other thing that I'm saying is I don't see where the affordability is going to come into it. It will be less expensive to purchase a tiny home and put it on the property that you own than it will be probably, although the mayor might be correct, it might be the same. I think it'd be less, to put it on a foundation and get the hookups to it. But there's no guarantee that if you do that, it's going to be rented for anything less than any other place that's going to be rented. The other thing is that if somebody buys it outright, it's going to be $60,000 to $100,000, so they have to have that, and then they're going to have to find a place to put it. The other thing that I would suggest is that if we're going to look at these, that let's really look at it in terms of allowing them in an area that where now perhaps a second dwelling unit is not permitted. And I'm thinking about somebody that may have a guest house without a kitchen. Right now, if they have more than a half a bath, is not permitted to have a second dwelling unit. Well, maybe we can exempt these from that ordinance, part of the zoning code, and say that you can have a tiny home. If you're going to have a tiny home, you can have it in adjunct to a guest house that might have a full bath, no kitchen though. So I think we ought to look at that. But there's a lot of things in this ordinance that to me seem to be very vague. For instance, when it talks about being able to not hook up to utilities, it says the house has adequate, safe, and sanitary utility systems. What does that mean? Adequate, safe, and sanitary utility systems. That's what the criteria is to say you don't have to hook up to the utilities. Well, I don't know what adequate and safe means. It's not defined anywhere in here. So, my thought is that if it's going to go back to the Planning Commission, and that's not the motion before us, but I'm going to say that now, depending on what happens with this motion, I think it goes back to them. I agree that it should go back to them. But a lot needs to be looked at because I think affordability is a smokescreen on these. I really and truly do.
Mayor Johnson?
Phil?
For many of the reasons just outlined by Councilperson Blatz, I'm not going to support your motion because I think it's important that this be referred to the Planning Commission for more vetting and public hearing. And I think it should be done with a time certain. So with respect, that's why I'm not going to support your motion. And depending on how it goes, I'll be offering a motion for it to be referred to the Planning Commission.
Well, just one final thought again. Some more information that needs to be gathered is, if we were to adopt this, how does that impact all of the other building codes that we have? And again, that's to me is just part of the reason that we need to slow down. We need to really understand the pluses and the minuses moving forward on something like this. And if we do have to do this, why don't we do these in actions either all together or that we at least have a thought process as to if we approve A, then we know that we're gonna move on to B, and then from B, we're gonna go to C. And right now, we don't know what we're doing, other than we have something before us that says that we need to approve an ordinance.
No, we're actually to approve it, whether we refer it to planning
Right,
commission.
planning. And like I said, I just don't, I have more questions. I need more information.
And I think that's what planning commission's for.
Okay.
I agree, Bill.
My reason for suggesting it be postponed until after the charrette process or the general plan update process is because if we send it back to the planning commission with as much division or confusion on the council and ask them to do something, they're gonna go right back through the same process they went through, when it seems like this is a policy question more than it is a project approval process that we're talking about. So with that, if nobody has anything further, let's go ahead and vote on the motion for postponement, and if that does not succeed, then we can open the discussion again. And
I have something to say. Councilmember Blatz, it seems like you brought up a lot of issues that aren't actually part of this discussion. You know, if you want to get something done and you want to get it done right, you find a way, okay? If you have spent any time in someone's tiny home and see how they lived, I believe that you would have a different opinion of this, okay?
Just to direct the questions through,
Yeah.
or the comments through the chair rather than at each other, okay?
Well, so many things where it's just adds to the confusion when you bring up all kinds of things that are not on the table. You know, a charrette process for a tiny house village is not on the table. You know, we're simply looking at crafting an ordinance that sets the highest standards for a tiny home. Obviously, there are people that want to have this housing option. That's all we're doing, is my understanding. We're not doing anything more, and that has nothing to do, in my opinion, with the Fannie Mae Award or anything of that nature. This discussion started over 2 years ago. If you go back, there was a matrix created by Vina. There's all kinds of material that we don't have in front of us tonight, but it's there if you go back over the Planning Commission and City Council records and listen. You know, there were presentations, there were slideshows. This is not anything new. This has been discussed for 2 years. And I think it's time to take it back to the Planning Commission and clarify the points in the ordinance that need clarification.
Other comments?
So last comment. I agree. We're gonna say, I'm gonna obviously vote to send it back to planning because we need more information. And again, the right way is to take the time that's necessary to do this right. I have one question, if anyone wants to answer it. Are tiny homes legal in the county?
No.
So that means that right now, anyone that lives in a tiny home, whether in the city or in the county, is doing it illegally, am I correct?
Well, it's not allowed,
Okay.
whether you want to take it to the level of the
So I'm
legality.
just trying to say to that point, that also demonstrates that there's no code enforcement regarding any of these units.
Oh, maybe we could ask Councilwoman Francina where the people are living in the tiny homes that she's seen.
Oh, right, I'm going to tell you.
Oh, are they in the, no, are they in the county? Are they in the
No.
county?
The tiny home.
They are in the
They
county.
are in the county,
Okay.
and actually,
I'm gonna call for a vote.
there have been tours to the home. Vina, why don't you come to the podium and address?
Well,
No.
let's
I
call
think
for
we're
a vote.
wandering off of
Okay,
the.
but-
On the
but-
motion.
Why don't we vote on the motion, because
But
it's.
the reason we're here tonight is so these people don't have to live in the shadow, that they can be legal. Somebody has to do this first.
But it's
If
still
you're
in
all-
but we're not going to legalize the county, and that's
No,
where.
no, we're not going to legalize the county, but it's a start.
city.
Plus the count, it's the count, if one, this is how it always goes. If one city does something, then other cities take it more seriously. You can see this pattern over and over again in life. Somebody has to take the lead, so.
Okay, let's vote.
Right.
Okay, is there any other comments? If not, let's have a vote on the motion.
I just had one last comment Mayor, I just had one last comment on.
Randy, you've had one more last time,
Okay,
several times.
But it was
this evening.
on,
Go
it was
ahead.
on come on, help me with the name. Beatrice Wood. And in Randy Haney's continual education, that was the first house that my wife took me to when we moved here 25 some years ago. And I said to her, Beatrice who?
Yeah, Beto. to
Yeah,
her friends.
but I am proud to say today that I do know who she is, and I do know what she has brought to this community, and the understanding of the arts and how it, and the impacts to our community. So, yes, we do need these. We need to do them right.
Okay, let's have a vote, and then we can move on to the
Councilmember Francina?
Are we voting on Mayor Johnson's?
postponement. Yes, we are.
Okay, no.
Councilmember Wyrick?
No.
Councilmember Blatz?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney?
No.
Mayor Johnston?
Yes.
All right, I'd like to make a motion, Mayor.
Bill?
I think we already have his motion. Oh, no, you haven't
No.
made it yet.
Motion failed, so I'm going to offer another
Okay,
motion.
Yeah.
I'm going to move that we refer the proposed ordinance draft for movable tiny houses to the Planning Commission for review and refinement and public hearing, and that Planning Commission will report back to this council with a report for the first city council meeting in May.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
My input on that, Bill, I'm along with it 100%, except for I just think May's too soon. I'd be inclined to think that we're gonna need a 3-month or a 6-month evaluation, but my gut says a minimum 3 months. So if you'd be willing to amend yours to 3 rather than, so bring it back in
2,
in June,
Two.
June, first city council meeting in June?
last city council meeting in June.
After graduation.
All right.
And all the weddings.
Second city council meeting in June.
There you go.
The maker of the motion, I think that it should go back to the Planning Commission, though, with a clean slate, that all options should be looked at for these. Leave them on wheels, take them off wheels, hook them to utilities, not hook them to utilities. Carve a special exception if they think that that's appropriate, so that a tiny house can be a secondary dwelling unit in addition to a guest house.
I'm not willing to accept that, because I think the key aspect of the option is to be able to build, is the movable tiny house. A tiny house on foundation is already allowed. So in terms of looking at an additional option, I think I want to keep it focused on the movable tiny house option.
Okay.
So that's my motion.
Okay. Further discussion?
Just to add, again, to what we're trying to do is to provide the Planning Commission and our new director guidance. Again, if there's going to be any code changes, any building code changes, if there's going to be anything supplemental to just saying we're going to allow these to be in the city of Ojai, again, I just like that to be inclusive. What are the impacts that allowing these in our community going to have on us, and what do we have to do to mitigate them? If that's
That's
here to
fine,
add.
yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
And, Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Paul?
I think that staff has got to somehow give us some sort of a projection of how many of these we may have, and the loss of tax revenues as a result of them. And my next question is, if they're allowable now on a foundation, we're allowing these tiny homes built to the tiny home standards in our code currently?
They would have to be built under Title 24, I believe.
Right,
currently.
not the way that they're built now. So they're not allowed in the city by putting a tiny home on a foundation.
You can build a tiny home on a foundation now according to Title 24.
And for those the members of the public who aren't familiar with the title numbers, you can build a tiny house, i.e. a small house, presently in the city if it meets the full building code requirements.
Correct.
Most of the typical tiny houses on wheels of the example shown in the pictures do not meet building code.
That's correct. What I'm saying is I want the Planning Commission to look at the aspect of taking the tiny home built with less than than the full building code requirements as they presently are being built and put it on a foundation.
Well, that's already, okay. My motion does not include that because I'm looking at the specific option of movable tiny house, which is a specific standard.
Okay? If we're not going to
That's my
include
motion.
putting it on a foundation, then I can't support it.
Okay, yeah, you can already do that.
You can already
No,
do that.
you can't do it unless it meets all of the current building codes.
Okay, well, I think it's clear what my motion is, you know?
Right.
That it's looking at the movable tiny house option as a referral to planning commission for evaluation, according to the stipulations otherwise.
Okay.
So again, one last comment. Again, if we're doing a matrix, we'd have this information before us. We'd be able to show what a tiny house on a foundation looks like versus a portable, removable tiny
I hope
house.
we get that back from the planning commission.
And that's what I'm looking for from the planning
Yes,
commission. To
yes.
clearly demonstrate to us.
Right.
And if you watch, which I'm sure most of us did, the planning commission, they had just as many questions, if not the same questions, that we're having here tonight.
So we give them a deadline and they get a report back to us.
But, Councilman Haney, the motion does not include them even looking at that option. The motion sends it back to them to look at nothing
movable-
but tiny houses on wheels.
Right, the
That's
movable-
what the motion is.
This ordinance, movable tiny house.
Right.
Creating a new option for ADU, correct?
Mr. Mayor, could I offer a clarification?
Please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, one
Please
last comment?
do.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Hopefully to clarify rather than continue the discussion, the draft ordinance on the table does allow for movable tiny houses that originally are built with wheels to be driven on, placed on a foundation, and the wheels pulled off. That might be what you're speaking to. That would be within this current draft ordinance. It would also allow tiny houses to be driven on and left in place with the wheels still attached.
But my understanding of the motion is we're taking that option out of what
No.
we're sending back.
No.
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 Yeah,
it's-
That was my
that's why it was
understanding, too.
clarifying.
No, it's
Okay.
still a movable tiny house if it's with the wheels removed. It's still a movable tiny house under this ordinance.
Okay,
Because you could put them back on.
okay, that's
That would
fine. I
make it
thought,
a-
my thought that you were taking that option out.
No, no, it's.
I think
it's
they
in-
call
it's in
those
here.
mobile homes right now,
Yeah.
and they have mobile home parks, you know, but,
All right,
okay, is any, well, I won't, okay, I'd like to call for a vote unless someone objects.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Yes.
Mayor Johnston,
No.
Councilmember Blatz.
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Why don't we take a short break and let those who have other things to do
I'll
escape.
go then.
All right. Meeting back to order. We have a number of items to get through and not all that much time. Hi, John.
I know.
Will the council come back to order, guys?
Oh, it's hopeless.
Yeah. Will the chief of police evict Commissioner Quillisi?
Randy, did you have that handout you were going to give me?
Okay. Okay, we're back in session here. Before we get to the next item, I have a couple of announcements. One, which we made earlier, during the special session, there was a conversation to be held, we thought, about the clean energy choice program that the city is engaged in. For those of you who didn't see that out on the table, as you leave, there are like 4 or 5 points, the announcements as to how that program is going to work. So that is no longer a closed session or disputed issue. And then I have an announcement here from the county that says that they are going to have a CERT, which is Community Emergency Response Team Training, on May 16th. The classes will be held at the Oakview Park and Resources at 555 Mahoney Street in Oakview. I'll repeat that. For those who are interested in community emergency response training on May 16th, there will be a class down in Oakview at the Oakview Community Center.
Mayor, do you know who's offering, obviously the fire department's offering that, but is, John, are you a part of that?
He's part of the fire department, yes.
Right.
A very big part.
Yeah.
So there's a staff that teaches. How, I know that that's countywide, it seems like, but how would we provide something within city limits? How could we ask for a CERT training for our community only? Or is that asking too much?
Consider it being asked. I'll follow through with it. No,
Okay.
yeah. You want it specific to the city? Is that what
Yes.
you're asking?
Well, it wouldn't be closed to people outside the city, but.
No, but you want to focus it
Yes.
closer to the city
And the
center,
city
maybe?
issues.
Hold
in
it,
the-
what,
yeah,
at the
city
Boyd
center.
Center or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I'll get back
So-
to you. I'll
Thank
go
you.
through Steve
Okay.
and get back to you.
Mr. Mayor, having graduated from the search training class, that, was it Commander Larrabee? Larrabee, do you know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about? They used to teach the search classes? No?
Yeah, I think that's the one for that DVD that was
Right, the one that,
produced,
yeah, that's about the time frame that I took it. I highly recommend the training. It's excellent. But it was done at the Oakview Center, Community Center, and there were a lot of people there. There were a lot of people from the city. I don't know whether you want to. I'm not sure you'd get enough to put it on just for people in the city.
Right, I think-
Countywide, it was really nice.
Yeah.
But it's an excellent program for being certified in terms of
So,
disaster training.
So why don't we maybe make the assessment after the May 16th meeting to see if we do need it for our
Right.
community?
So we'd encourage all of those, you in the audience, as well as those listening at home or on your
great.
computers, that we would encourage you to take advantage of this. May 16th, 6:30 to 9 p.m., and it will continue for 5 consecutive Wednesdays. So,
As I was going
okay.
to say, it's a 5-week program.
And you can contact Supervisor Bennett's office directly at 654-2703. That's area code 805-654-2703. Okay, thanks. We'll go to the next item, which is rebalancing the council seats. Bill Miley go home? He had an idea. Yeah, he told me that we should weigh all the council people and take an average in order to determine, no, I'm sorry, Paul.
So like the 1 foot in hot water, 1 foot in cold, and
Yeah,
you're comfortable
yeah.
in between?
Well, yeah. So you may get an email from him on that. Okay, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So the question before the council tonight is if the city council would like to consider rebalancing the election of seats as it's currently set up. As most are aware, the city made a change at the last election to begin a directly elected mayor, and that directly elected mayor serves a 2-year term. Previously, all 5 members of the council were elected at large and served 4-year terms. And alternately, the elections are held every other year. And for what had traditionally been done was that there would be 3 members of council in one cycle, and then the next cycle there would be 2 members of council. With the addition of or with the change to the 2-year term for mayor, the mayor is now coming up, or will be continuing to come up every 2-year cycle. And what we currently have right now would be considered unbalanced in terms of, again, previously we'd had 3 and then 2 on each election cycle. So in 2018, there are 3 seats on the council that are coming up for expiration, which means as it currently stands, there would be 4 seats on the ballot in November of 2018, the 3 4-year seats of the city council that are expiring, as well as the 2-year mayor term. So council does not have to take any actions if they do not want to, but they may want to take consideration to, again, to try to rebalance it so that there's less changeover each cycle, so that it's back split between 3 and 2. And there are a couple of options that we've outlined here in the staff report for council to consider. One possible remedy would be that the council could direct that 2 of the 3 open seats be for 4-year terms, and that the third be designated as a 2-year term. What that would mean then on the ballot, there would be 2 seats for 4 and 1 for 2, and folks would have to come in and specifically determine which seat they were going to be seeking in the election. So that would be one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to direct that of the 3 open seats coming up in 2018, or you could always do that at some future date as well, that you could designate that the lowest vote getter among the top 3 would then serve a 2-year term. So that would then rebalance it in terms of then in year 2020, you would have the 2-year mayor and you would have 2 council members. And then back in 2022, again, you'd have the mayor and 2 council members. Another option that we outlined in the staff report, if the council, again, is looking to rebalance, you could take something to the voters if you wanted to change the term for the mayor. That is not something that is within the council's power to do, but you would need to take that to the voters, and you could put that on a future ballot for the voters to approve. If the voters approve that, you could change the mayor from a 2-year to a 4-year, and that would also take away the balancing issue. Be happy to answer any questions.
Bill?
Thank you, Mayor Johnston. Maybe a question for our city attorney. Theoretically, if we put on, let's say we chose option 2, and also put on the next election the option of having the mayor term be 4 years, on the condition that that option 2 would not only go into effect if the voters did not vote for a 4-year conversion to 4-year term, would that rebalance? In other words, you could not, the mayor has to sit for a 2-year term this election. But it could be on the ballot for the voters also on the same election, let the 2-year term be converted to a 4-year term. But that would only be in effect after the subsequent 2-year term. That next election would be 4-year. Is that correct, if that passed?
2020.
If
Yeah,
the
2020.
mayor's term is set at a 4-year term with the next election, 2020, I think that doesn't solve the rebalancing. You'd have to have it take effect the one after that in 2022. Or am I missing that?
You're
no,
missing that.
that would solve it if it would be, because it wouldn't be a mayor, yeah.
That would solve it as
Yes,
of 2020.
so if it was mayor, so if you put it as the voters were asked to approve switching the mayor's term to 4 years, which would take effect in 2020, or if not approved, then the lowest vote getter would get
Right.
the 2-year term.
I'm just wondering if that's an option.
I think that would be lawful.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, that, again, are there any, Steve, off the top of your head, are there any fiscal costs related to putting this back to the voters regarding removing the 2-year mayor's position?
There would be minimal costs associated with adding it to the ballot. We could get you some estimated costs on that, but it wouldn't be too significant.
Well, that would be, I'm in complete agreement with Bill. In fact, that was gonna be my motion, so I'm for that, if anyone else wants to chime in.
I just have a question. So on the ballot, it would be to change the mayor's term from 2 years to 4 years.
Correct.
But not for this election.
Couldn't be.
Okay, it would have to be in 2020. Okay.
So whoever's running for mayor this year is running for 2 years.
2 years,
Knowing
yeah.
that in 2020,
Right.
when he or she's up,
Yeah.
that it'll be for a 4-year.
That's correct.
And then that would put us back in balance with 2 4-year and 3 4-year.
Right.
So are you suggesting that's all we do?
No, my suggestion is that we adopt option 2, because that lets the voters decide in how to rebalance. Only if the voters fail or say no
The fallback.
to converting the 2-year term to a 4-year term, because if we convert from a 2 to a 4-year, it would balance. It would just take a while.
Right.
But if the voters say, no, we want to keep with a 2-year term, then the option is let the voters also decide how to rebalance by the least number of votes would be the 2-year term. That's my suggestion.
Okay, so option 2 means that somebody has to pick.
No, the voters pick.
No, but somebody has to pick serving for 2 years.
No.
No, the
it's
voters
the
decide.
one with
Right.
the council people, those that are elected to the council during that cycle, the person who gets the fewest votes would have the short term.
Yeah, the voters would decide.
The voters would be deciding.
Okay.
Whoever falls in
okay,
third
okay, I get
place,
it.
right.
Sorry, yeah, I
The
get it.
third place,
If,
I understand.
if they vote to not
not go convert the mayor's,
mayors.
right. And that's my suggestion, is I let the voters decide first whether or not they want to, go to a 4-year term. Personally, I don't think it's healthy to have the mayor only 2 years. I know some people think it should go only 2 years, but I don't think it's structurally good, because it doesn't let you really settle in and think about governing.
Yeah.
You're kind of thinking about campaigning right away almost.
Yeah,
And then, but I think that we have to rebalance one way or the other.
yeah.
Let the voters have the choice of whether or not to go convert to a 4-year term, that would rebalance. Or if they say no, then we rebalance by the voters deciding who gets the 2-year term.
Right, based on,
We could also rebalance by having the voters say whether they wanted us to go back and not have an elected mayor,
Well, that's true, too.
and then rotate.
Correct.
Right. That's true, too.
Right. Souza?
Okay, now, rather than, we could do the two, if we needed to do the 2-year, we could base that on the least number of votes, but we could first ask if someone wants 2 years, because someone who's previously served, for example, you might only want 2 years.
Unfortunately, the council would have to set the rules up front.
Yes,
Right.
we can set that up front.
No,
Oh, we can't?
no. Unfortunately, the candidates running for the office would have to know what they're running for. So I don't believe it would be lawful under the elections
They won't
code.
know, because it's gonna be, they won't know until until they won't know who's gonna get the least amount of votes.
No, yeah, that's right.
That is correct, but it can't be the council can't choose, because the elections code wouldn't permit the council even individually choosing who would wish to serve the 2-year term. And the scenario to consider would be if all three who are elected do not wish a 2-year term. There would be no way to force a 2-year term.
No, I'm saying both. I'm saying that you would either do by the least number of votes, but if one council member chooses 2 years, then you
Yeah.
wouldn't have to do that. You could say that up front.
Unfortunately, the elections code wouldn't permit that choice.
okay, so.
It allows the council these two options, or the third option.
But in effect,
like
any
outlined.
member of the council can
Resign.
to
always
not serve any
resign.
more than
Right.
2 years and step off.
Right.
And
And-
resign, which has happened.
And in which case, the council would have the ability to fill the term that remains.
Right, it wouldn't have to go to a vote then.
Or if the council could
could.
kick it to a vote.
So I wanted to clarify my perspective. I am interested in removing the mayor, the voted-in mayor position, period, whether it's 2 years or 4 years, and go back to a rotational basis. Okay, that's what I'd like to see regarding the mayor. And then,
That could be on the ballot, too.
right,
Yes.
Right.
Okay. And one clarification, as I stated earlier, I think the Councilmember Wyrick's approach would work. We will confirm that, though, with a careful evaluation.
Okay.
Okay, now I have a card here from Carol. Is Carol still here, or did she
Yes.
give up the ghost? Yeah, okay. If not, I think Steve's here. He can take her position, her spot. Come on down, Steve.
I need to ask Matt something. I didn't understand what just happened.
Okay, we'll come back to it.
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Quillisi, West Eucalyptus Street in the city. I would contend that if option 2 were to pass, the council would be rebalanced, whether the mayor's term was 2 years or 4. It just depends which cycle has 3 seats and which has 2. And I'm not sure, and the city attorney could probably say, is it legal to say you, the citizens, can pass this ballot measure, but it will be denied if you don't pass this ballot measure? It sounds to me like that's what's going on here. I think it's 2 separate issues. If you do option 2, then you're going to have 2 council members each cycle. And whether the mayor's term is 2 years or 4 years will only determine which election cycle has 3 seats and which has 2. But the council's voting will already be balanced. That is, 3 seats in one cycle and 2 in the next. And so I'm not sure that you could make one vote. You were saying, Mr. Wyrick.
That's why I asked the city attorney.
Yeah, that's, I think if you said you can pass this, but only if you pass that, or only if you don't pass that, it's 2 separate votes.
The option 2 is an action of council, not the voters. The conversion to 2 to 4 years would be the action of the voters. So we would be making a council action, not a voter action, a council action contingent on the choice of the voters.
Then the voters have no say in whether you have this thing done by the council.
Mayor and council, I'm happy to clarify the point. The government code allows a special option for the city council by resolution to take one of the 2 options on the table, designating in order to rebalance the council only in the position in which you have a voter-approved, directly elected mayor that is off cycle. The only 2 options the council can take by itself are option 1, directing 2 of the seats 4-year terms, 1 of the seat 2-year term, or option 2, directing of the 3 seats the lowest vote getter who is elected be a 2-year term. Any other option requires voter approval.
And could I add to that? So Steve, my contention is that allows the most voter determination, because the voters first decide if they want to keep with the 2-year term or go to a 4-year, or maybe we have the whole issue of elected period. But then they decide by their votes who, if they decide to stay with the 2-year term, who serves the 2-year on council. In other words, it maximizes voter choice. My suggestion, I believe.
What if they turned them both down?
If they say, well,
We'd be back where we are right now,
no,
I guess.
the only issue for the voters would be to decide who's in 3rd place, which is, just a matter, that always happens. There's a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. And then the only decision the voters would actually be making is whether or not we get the mayor's term goes to, whether everybody serves 4-year terms or not.
Okay, I have something to say. So this is driven, is this driven by the fear that come next election, I'll be the only experienced person here? Is that part of the reason? Because I would be inclined to wait another election cycle. Just let it play out. Let's just see, because having a mayor for 2 years is something new.
Yeah, I just think it's structurally imbalanced.
That's the reason, right?
That is a big part of why this is before you. If the council is concerned with that imbalance, they have some opportunities to address that, but.
Okay, I have 2 comments to make. One, I'm not sure whether it was Randy or Paul who said it, but I would I'm in agreement that there's more flexibility to determine who will be the chair and the face of the city government when under the general laws of California, what we had before they elected a mayor. And that the idea of a mayor, Bill's right, that in a way, you're either creating a lame duck with a short term, or you do have somebody who is politically, I guess, ambitious and spends all their time thinking about campaigning, or you get an old dragon like me to come out of his den and who really is perfectly happy with 2 years. But the reality is that why would you create a mayor's leadership position and have it serve half the time of the rest of the council, and have to spend twice as much money and run twice as often? My good buddy Bill Miley said, well, what if we got a lousy mayor? You know, we got to get, you know, that would be a way to, you know, wouldn't have to put up with them that long. And I think, well, that's true. They should vote for a good mayor. But if they didn't, the best way to do it is to go back to the old way. Then there is no security in sitting as the chair, and the council can rotate it as just to share the wealth. Or if they get somebody they don't like, they can remove them.
So what's your
anyway,
preference, Mayor?
It isn't going to affect my life one way or the other, I don't think. But I think that what your suggestion makes good sense. Let the voters decide what they want.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm in support of
Just one other comment again. And this is, I'm not speaking down to you or anything of
That's
your
a good
mayor,
thing, Randy,
of
because
your
I
mayor
don't take
leadership.
that very kindly.
I haven't seen the benefit of having an elected mayor versus the rotational mayor. And the benefit that I see in the rotational mayor is, one, it makes us all better council people. It all allows us to lead. It all allows us to demonstrate to the community that we're actively involved in the community. And again, the process that we had in the past of the rotation of the pro tem, the rotation of the mayor, I just, in hindsight, again, I don't know if we were hoodwinked or how we were convinced that this is the way to go. But from all the people that I talked to, I haven't heard anyone say there's a benefit to it. So I have.
I can tell you from personal
Regardless
experience,
of the
folks.
personality.
Yeah, I can tell you from personal experience. First, I voted against electing the mayor back when this was put on the ballot, and I voted for the 2-year term using the Bill Miley thing of what if we get one that's, you know, is trouble. But I was under the illusion that we were going to create a mayor with some additional authority to go along with the additional responsibility. But as it's turned out, the mayor gets a lot of additional responsibility and no authority.
Right.
And my colleagues here have all made sure that I understand that I'm but one vote, and that's only for 2 years. So,
Well, again, if they recognize the role and what benefits you do have, you're the only council person slash mayor that can put an item on the agenda without a second. The rest of us have to get a second.
you see how that's worked out. We just made it a part of our agenda because you guys were always two guys were putting things on the agenda. We might as well do it in public.
So what I'm saying is, you're absolutely right in that. The fact that we didn't create a new form of leadership in our community, because first of all, we can't.
Right. Even the idea of nominating for boards and commissions was, that's just the way the system's set up. So it's kind of a waste.
And in all honesty, the way that we have to do it this time is even if we decide that we want to go back to a rotational mayor, this time we have to vote for a mayor for 2 years.
Well, and I guess there's nothing to prevent our putting, again, it out there for the voters.
Right, but what I'm saying is, let's say we give the voters a choice. Do you want the mayor to be 2 years, change from 2 years to 4 years? Or would you like it to go back to the way it is and rotate the way it used to be?
It's still going to take another 2 years.
It's still going to take another 2 years before you get to that point.
Right, and so that could be two things on the ballot. Do you want to go back, do you want to continue with an elected mayor?
Or move it from 2 to 4.
Or go back to what we had, and it could also be, do you want to have the mayor's term be, the elected mayor's term be 4 years? Those could both be on the ballot.
Correct. I'm just saying, it's going to take 2 years for it to be enacted.
Right, we're still all looking at 2020.
Right. And then that mayor's position is going to be up for another reelection.
In 2020.
In 20.
But it will either be for a 4-year term. Well, it will be for a 4-year either way.
That's correct.
Four-year term as a council person.
Right, or a four-year term as a
four-year
mayor.
term as a mayor.
That's correct.
So,
Yeah.
So,
And, one more last comment, Randy. It just occurred to me, we have one other choice. We could put it on the ballot to give the mayor authority. That would,
well, I'll be
I'm
part of
not
that.
here in a second. Why, surprise, surprise. Good. Steve?
I don't know if this will help the discussion or not, but just as I'm thinking this out, if the council wanted to take the option 2, and for 2018, the third highest vote getter would only get a 2-year term, you could go that route and then put the questions on for the mayor. If the mayor situation doesn't get resolved, it would at least be rebalanced at that point. If the voters decide to either return it back to, to take away the directly elected mayor, it would just be an at-large 4-year seat, or if they went to the 4-year mayor term, that would take effect then in 2020. You wouldn't need to do anything to balance at that point.
right. Yeah, that's, my proposal is it balances itself.
Right. So
Either way.
So you might not need to get into this. If the voters don't approve X, then Y.
That's why you give them the two options.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
all.
Do we
that's
have
the
any
way to go.
speakers cards? Have we?
Oh, yeah, well, we had Carol, but Carol wasn't
Oh, that
here,
was it?
and Steve
Okay.
took her place.
Okay.
So,
And I wanted to add that one of the reasons, the motivations for putting the elected mayor, we ought to get it just out on the table here. One of the reasons that the people that promoted the elected mayor, and I didn't agree with this, is they thought it would be a first step to a charter city commission.
Right.
And I don't think that's a direction we want to go, and that we're ever going to go. So, I think the rationale for that kind of has gone away, so.
I agree. That was the thought process where we would no longer be a city manager form of government.
Right.
We'd be a strong mayor. And having lived through it for 8 years on the council and now 2 years with the elected mayor, I think that we could rotate a mayor every 2 years instead of every year if we wanted to. But I really think that probably rotating amongst the five of us makes more sense than having to have somebody that has the responsibilities of mayor having to do it every 2 years particularly.
Yeah, I think that's
it's a lot of work for a 2-year election.
Particularly bad to the two-year
Yeah.
term.
If it went to 4 years, that's fine too. But I just think the opportunity for the council, each member of the council, to move into the mayor's seat, given the fact it's still only one vote, probably is what's best for the community.
So I'm hearing the two options are, unless Susie, you want to speak? Did you want to speak?
don't want to get it done.
I'm just saying, I'm hearing the two things that we put to the voters are, one, that we rescind the voting of a mayor. And two, the second one is that we take it from 2 years to 4 years, and we let the voters do that.
Right.
There's no balancing act that isn't gonna take place till 2020 anyway.
Those would be the two things on the ballot, and then we'd still have time to decide between option 1 and option 2, right, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes,
We
the,
have to decide before the election.
it would have to be
Yeah.
built into the resolutions that would be adopted in June for the election in November,
Right,
ahead of the opening of the candidate filing period in mid-July,
right.
July 10th.
Don't you legally have to also give them the choice of 2 years, since that's what they voted for? You don't,
The ballot question would be two ballot questions. One, shall the mayor be directly elected or not? And if directly elected, shall the mayor have a 2-year or a 4-year term? And the language for both of those is prescribed by the government code. So that would give the voters effectively all three choices.
okay.
Directly elected mayor, 2-year, 4-year, or council-appointed mayor. So in effect, the ballot questions on that aspect would be the same as the ballot questions were in the 2014 election, when the original decision was made
Sounds like
to
it would
move
take-
to an elected mayor.
How do you?
Well, it's two questions where you vote, shall the mayor be directly elected, yes or no?
Okay.
Shall the mayor's term be 2 years or 4 years?
Well, Bill, did you make a motion, or did you?
I'll make a
you attempt it? Okay, Bill's, we'll have a motion in a second, and then we'll continue the discussion. It's time to start bringing it at least into focus here.
So I'll make a motion that we proceed with putting on the ballot two questions. One, whether or not we continue with an elected mayor. And 2, if we continue with an elected mayor, is that term 2 or 4 years?
Second.
Or should it be converted to 4 years? If continued with the elected mayor?
Yeah, you'd have to be real, may I speak?
Those are that's my motion.
With a second.
You what, the second?
Paul second.
So you would have, oh,
No, I've seconded it. Go.
okay, can I speak?
Yeah,
So you'd have to word that very, very
Yes,
carefully.
I think my motion will be, I'll add to my motion, see if I get a second, that the precise wording be brought back to this council for approval.
Like I said, that will happen. The
resolution.
measure, the resolutions calling the election and putting these questions on to the ballot will be brought back as part of the election resolutions in June. The language for these 2 ballot questions is dictated by the government code, so we will exactly follow the government code.
But council would see that too.
And it requires council approval, although it is also
The
dictated by the government
confusing
code.
part of it is that in this election where they're voting on that, they're also going to be voting for an elected mayor for 2 years.
Correct.
That's where the confusion
Right.
comes in.
You're gonna be
True.
confused.
We have, what I'm saying is that my motion is to proceed with getting that official wording brought back to us for final decision.
I second it.
Just don't put them in order.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, do we need a roll call on this matter, or is it,
I would recommend a roll call.
okay. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Blatz?
Yes.
Councilmember Francina?
Yes,
Councilmember Wyrick?
Yes?
Mayor Johnston?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, then nothing going forward then in terms of this option 2 with the 3rd highest vote getter, that is all off the table for
No,
now?
it's not off the table, it's deferred.
Be part of the process at the,
It's part of
Okay.
the process of coming back.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, our next topic is commenting on the state water interconnection project with a notice of preparation, is that what that means? NOP, yeah, notice of
Yes.
preparation.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just comment, I thought that Richard Hedges' presentation today was very, very good. I really thought that a lot of preparation went into that, and it clarified it for me, and I know that he wasn't the only one that had input into that, because there were other people on the committee. But I thought that it was well done, thorough, and it sure clarified things for me more than I've had before that presentation. And I don't know how we can forcefully put it forward to Casitas that as a community, we really want them to move forward in the direction that was recommended. But I just wanted to publicly comment on the presentation tonight, how well
I was hoping
how
during
well it
future
was.
agenda items, when we get to that we put that on for the future agenda item for us to consider an official endorsement. Absolutely.
Okay.
But I think right now, it's just a matter of whether we send this is the EIR for the interconnection. It's not having to do, and
Right.
so I'm going to vote, I'm going to make a motion that we accept the staff recommendation and allow a deadline of, let's see, it's due March 30th?
Yes.
That we, comments from council are no later than March 29.
Okay.
Second?
wait a minute.
Okay, do we have any cards on that? I didn't see any.
No.
No.
It will be up to the city manager to decide whether to accept the comments or not.
Okay.
Okay?
March 29 is Thursday.
Yeah, that's right now.
Yeah, well, so basically, all we're saying is that we have no objection to the fact, because all they're doing is saying that this notice of preparation. And
This is just the EIR.
Yeah,
right.
and we're not arguing
Draft, right?
that they shouldn't,
Right.
you know.
Adding a few comments about things to look at, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, we think it's helpful for the city to get on position with making comments on the notice of preparation. It's helpful for if we do decide to make comments later on the draft EIR.
My motion basically defers basically delegates this to the judgment of the city manager.
Okay.
Okay, everybody agree? Any further discussion? Okay, if there's no objection, and we'll so order. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, though, just to touch on what Paul said, that was probably the only question that we didn't ask Richard, was a call to action for this community. Because that's what it's gonna take, is the community to actually get to Casitas.
Well, that was why I
and
asked
put
him
some
how much
pressure.
time we had.
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't ask him for a call to action, and it would have been great to hear it from him, what he thought we should be doing, or doing more of. Okay?
Okay, request from 2 council members to receive a cannabis ad hoc committee report. So is that just to receive and file, or are we?
Well, I'd like to ask that we make a short statement, the two of us.
Okay, and we also, do we have cards on this item by chance? No, okay.
Yeah, we have cards.
Oh, yeah, okay, we do have cards. Okay, I guess we'll start with the committee report back.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to make it very short. The reason that Councilperson Francina and I are coming back with the report the way it is because of what we learned from conditions. That we believe that we need further consultation with in particular law enforcement and the city manager to vet the idea of vertical integration, vertical diversification of possible cannabis types of licenses in the community. But we do have one pressing issue that's separate from that. And that is that it's become very clear that one of the impacts of Prop 64 passing the state and the implementation of the licensing by the state effective January 1st, and also within the environment of City of Ojai being the highest percentage of passage of Prop 64 positively in the county, that a medical cannabis dispensary is not financially viable doing just medical cannabis. And this is because of the regulatory and the result of the actions of the voters and the regulatory structure put in place by the state. So what I think our report is saying is that, yes, we need to look at more than just the issue that I'm bringing up right now, but that the pressing matter is that given that our mission here, given that our objective was to provide medical cannabis access to our citizens, that mission or that goal is threatened if we do not allow the medical cannabis dispensaries to also provide adult use. That would require a fairly quick text amendment in our current code. And I think that, coupled with the already approved by this council moving forward with an ordinance amendment allowing the testing licenses, ought to go forward bifurcated on a more accelerated basis than the further consideration we need to spend on things like manufacturing and other issues that we ought to absolutely move forward on as well. But we have kind of a pressing time problem that our ability to support medical cannabis access is threatened if we don't allow these existing dispensaries to also provide adult use. And I'm suggesting, I think what we're suggesting is that there be an additional local tax on adult use, and that we also put provisions in there that you've got to be up and running. And you can read in my report that I provided with Councilperson Francina, that they also have to be up and running as a medical cannabis dispensary before they can go ahead and get an adult use license. So I'd just like to ask that we vote to have staff come up with a text amendment along those lines for us to consider at the next meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a question for Councilman Wyrick. If it is not financially viable to have a medical dispensary. Standalone. And it is financially viable to have a recreational standalone, who's to say that we're going to increase the availability of medical marijuana? Maybe we'll lose the ability to provide medical marijuana while we're allowing for the recreational use.
Because the condition is that only the dispensaries that are providing medical marijuana can have recreational.
Right, that's the proposal, is that you could not
It's clearly stated in the.
have a
intent.
license in the city of Ojai unless you were a medical cannabis provider.
Okay, and educate me, what's the difference between the use of medical marijuana, obviously you need it for your health reasons, and recreational marijuana?
The, one would be that it would be the tax issue, all right, number one. Number two, you need a doctor's recommendation for medical cannabis access. And there are some, as I understand it, some differences in the kinds of product demand that you get out of the medical cannabis. For example, medical cannabis demand is going to be more focused on a wider range of products than adult use probably. For example, I know that there are sprays that people have that they put on their painful, direct application creams and sprays for pain on their joints. That's probably not something that's going to be real. You're going to see a lot of use in terms of adult use demand. So it has to do with the nature of demand and the fact that we would differentially tax adult use in my proposal.
Okay. So we're going to make it more difficult for somebody to get it for medical reasons than we are for recreational reasons. We're not going to require any doctors.
That's required by the state. In other words, you would have, in order to be a medical cannabis customer, you have to have the doctor's recommendation. That's a
Correct. Well,
state regulation.
why would we require that if we just made it all recreational, and the recreational portion of it would have whatever the medical people are using now?
Well, I want to, I think somebody wants to talk, but is that all right? Mayor, will we allow public comment at this point?
Mr. Mayor, I can offer a quick clarification on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
The key difference on the practical aspect between medical and adult use cannabis is taxation. Medical cannabis purchasers of a certain sort, i.e. those who have a county issued medical patient card, are exempt from state excise taxes. Other purchasers are not.
Right.
And that's a state exemption. We wouldn't have any ability to change that.
Right, just to add to that, you can have your doctor referral and not have your county-issued card. You can still get your medical cannabis, which would be subject to tax.
And then the other difference is that under Prop 64, adult use cannabis individuals can have up to an ounce of dried product and equivalent amounts of infusions and goos and things. Medical cannabis patients can have as much of the product of the medicine as their doctor has prescribed. They're not subject to those
Recommended,
possession
not
limits.
prescribed.
Pardon me, recommended.
And
They're not subject to those size or amount limits.
And another thing that drives my motivation for making this recommendation is that I contend that it's better to have this regulated than not regulated. And unless we allow an adult use, you can't get adult use unless you already have a medical cannabis license. I think that's important. That's what I'm recommending. We're basically encouraging and driving unregulated activity which is, I think, unhealthy. I think it's healthier to have the regulated activity than the unregulated activity. The existing dispensaries are having people walk in and walk out, and they're just not able to survive financially. But I think that our policy is that our purpose is primarily the medical cannabis access, and that's why I want to say you can't have an adult use license unless you are operating already as a medical cannabis licensee in good standing. So that's my feeling.
If the council is in agreement, Jeff, come on up and.
First off, there's a big difference between medical and recreational. And one of them is the consulting of medical. Now, how do I get someone to even consider some of the consultations? They have to come in. Access. What we're doing is basically saying you can have access in this one framework, but no access in this other framework. Right now, 50% of the people that are coming into my shop are seniors. 70% of Ojai, of 7,500 people, totals, I have a petition. 5,274 people have said they wanted adult access. Most of the seniors that come in are really pissed off. They're pissed off that they have to spend $39 or $150 or $200 to keep this process going when the BCC is actually encouraging the removal of medical in
It's
time.
the Bureau of Cannabis Control, Jeff.
Bureau of
Put it out
Cannabis
there
Control,
For the record,
yes.
it's a state agency.
Each of these permit fees are $12,000 for adult and medical. Not yet since January 11th has anyone presented me at yet the county card to get away from taxes, because the county card cost $120. That's a lot of tax revenue. And in fact, most people don't need or buy or consume that volume to equal that county card cost. But recreational and not having access steers them to delivery services and other forms of getting it. They get it anyway, but it's not tested. It isn't paying tax on it. It isn't being properly supervised by security or having the facility. Right now, and I've had conversations with law enforcement, what do we do about the illegal delivery services? Because we close at 7 o'clock, there are 4 delivery services in Ojai right now that start delivering at 4 p.m. and do completion of delivery at 1 a.m. Who needs a delivery at that time? Yet, I've talked to law enforcement, it's not their job. It's code enforcement. And it's true as to whether they should have a permit in place to do delivery. Now, the problem is, where do you get the money for that? I have no problem with the 3% being taxed on code enforcement for it to be used, just like the BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, just released $15 million for grants for law enforcement to help them destroy the black market. Those that were in the gray market, and I admit I was in that market before, but I've spent 7 years going through paradise, through hell to get to paradise in order to follow every rule, regulation on the books in black and white. And I've earned this right to be able to give cannabis, all right? So, all right, ask a specific question.
Mr. Mayor. Jeff, you're saying that all these people don't want to go get their doctor's recommendation. They just want to be able to come in and get their
Most
marijuana.
of the members of Shangri-La, 700 members, were seniors, 56 years of age. I've been closed down for over a year and a half. They did not renew their recommendations, or when Prop 64 happened, they didn't feel they needed to. Now I have to tell them they need an appointment, and they also need to have a medical recommendation.
Well, what are they
So,
doing?
and what do they do? About half of them go out angry and just basically say, that's not what I voted for. I voted for access. We will be saving lives by creating access of safe homeopathic remedies that can deal with pain.
So how are
Law
you,
enforcement,
how are you going to distinguish if you're not going to require any kind of a ID or medical recommendation? How are you going to distinguish between your customers that are getting it for medical reasons that don't pay tax versus people that are going to use it for recreation that do pay tax?
the recreational is the age is 21, not 18. Medical is 18. 21 years of old, we're letting them drink. We don't want them to drive. We have a major problem with alcohol.
So you're saying that the only people that you're going to be selling
I'm saying I don't have an
medical-
opportunity to talk to someone if they're afraid to come in.
If
Okay,
they don't
but
have
you're
to
saying-
pay,
go and
they
when
don't
they
have the
met-
doctor's
Okay, come on, guys,
recommendation.
let's coordinate
Just
this.
one last question.
Sure.
You're saying that the only people you're going to be selling medical marijuana to then are the 18 to 20-year-olds?
No, the
No,
ones that have medical
Bill, let
recommendations.
Paul
I'm
finish
saying
his
that's
question,
the
and then
limit,
we'll come to you.
that's the age limit that is set by the Proposition 64. You have to be 21 years or older in order to get access to cannabis on a recreational basis. It's 18 for medical,
And a medical recommendation.
and they have to have a doctor's recommendation, all right? Now, what's happening is more and more of the doctors who used to write recommendations are going away. So where do they go? There's 2 locations that used to be in Ventura. They're gone. They're closed down because Prop 64. So I had 2 people who had to drive all the way to Tarzana to get their medical recommendation. And they are upset because of the rules. They said they voted for it. 58% of the county.
Okay,
And that's
that's a
over
political
500,000.
answer. Let's stay with the
That's
technical
your
answer. Bill,
mandate.
did you have something you?
No, I think that the difference is that if you don't have a recommendation, you're not a medical cannabis. If you don't have a medical recommendation or the county card, then you're not a medical cannabis customer. I mean, it's pretty clear, okay?
But that's the way it was before the new law passed.
No, what happened is that after Prop 64 passed, all right, people voted for the adult use that was not allowed previously,
Correct.
okay?
Well, it was allowed as long as you had a medical recommendation. What I'm hearing is that the medical recommendations that were being given out, so you could use it before, are not being given out now because nobody needs them anymore.
No, I think.
That's what I'm hearing.
Well, again, that's why I don't want to have, that's why I think you put in a financial differential to encourage people to still get the recommendations. And and that gives you a revenue stream for enforcement.
One real important point, I don't have an access to them at recreational. I don't have an opportunity to give them any medical kind of coaching. About half the people who come in for recreational want advice, want information, and would love to hear the knowledge about medical. But they don't come in because it's not allowed.
Can't let them in. Yeah. So I'm just gonna try a motion.
Well, I think we need to continue, if you don't mind, a little more.
Okay.
You know, this is what I'm hearing, that we have 2 problems. We don't have enough business for medical marijuana. That's what I'm hearing. Correct. Okay?
Because of Prop 64.
I'm just saying, that's
Yeah.
the first issue. We don't have enough business. So in our society and in what we are, capitalists and supply and demand, do we have too many dispensaries? I'm just speaking out loud. I'm not speaking to you, I'm just speaking out loud. So the theory would be to let this sort itself out and let the strongest survivor win.
But that-
And whether it's one person wins or 2, or maybe all 3 of you win.
But the problem is that reduces access to medical cannabis in Ojai.
So I'm just, no, I don't think so.
Well, it
My
does.
gut says that the supply side of it is, if there's only enough need for one dispensary, there'll be one dispensary. And the other 2 are gonna go out of business. That's just the way it goes. So now what I'm hearing is, so that we don't go out of business, we would like the opportunity to increase business by offering the recreational opportunity. I don't need your answer. I'm speaking out loud. That's what I'm hearing.
That's not what I'm saying.
So,
Not what I'm saying.
so I'm hearing that with those 2 sources, me as a business person, I might be able to stay in business longer. There's no guarantee of that either, but that's my guess. Now, I'm a landscape contractor, and I'm trying to figure out how I can get this council to write some ordinances and write some rules and regulations that benefit my business only. Because that's what I'm kind of hearing right now is we're in the struggle medically. We need to enhance our ability to generate income, and therefore, if we do this, that will do it. You're in competition with the underground economy, and so am I. So is most businesses in this community. In the underground economy can be someone doing it cheaper than me that's not licensed, It can be someone that's going on the internet and buying a product and then taking it back and saying, I can get it here, give it to me for that price. You're in business, and I think business is struggling because I think we might have created this imbalance by opening too many of these stores.
So why
Now-
do we want to encourage more underground economy?
Well, what I'm trying to say is you'll never discourage it. It's going to be there. It's a part of supply and demand. If I can get it cheaper, I'm gonna go get it cheaper, and that's what people do all the time.
No, I
I
think
wish there was a way of creating an environment that said, if you come to a regulated store, it's a better way to do
That's what people
business.
want. They want to come to a regulated store, and right now they can't.
So I'm just hearing the two things, and that's the problem that concerns
Okay,
me.
we don't have a,
Okay, go
we
ahead.
don't have a motion yet.
I'll offer one.
So if there's a motion, we'll take a motion. If not, we'll move on.
But
Yeah,
we have
Bliss
other
has still got, yeah, Bliss will have her opportunity. Yeah, okay, let's hold them. Come on down. Let's,
Thank you for hearing from me. I did put together some comments I was going to read, but after all of this, I'd like to shift it a little bit, okay?
okay.
And I did,
And
I
hold it
did.
to the 3 minutes so we
Yes,
can.
I did give you guys each a safety manual on what we're talking about, our cannabis extraction lab. But here's the thing I'm hearing from all of you, and I just wanted to give you my view because I've been focused on this cannabis issue now for several years, and I really wish that I had been involved when you guys first, during the medical part of it last year, were making these decisions on the direction that the city would go, because, you know, in my opinion, the medical was how it was last year. And what you guys are looking at is progress. In my opinion, medical will be gone within the next couple of years. And so you guys are about to put together a whole bunch of ordinance, all based on something that I believe is going out. You know, that was the way that we did it. And if you look at what happened with Prop 64, it's now this is how we're doing it. And so you would be smart to actually embrace the law that everyone voted for, and particularly a majority of people in Ojai want, which is embrace adult use. And under adult use, the state has it all really clear on what the allowing is. So I'm suggesting you just take the law as the citizens wanted it and accept it, and just alter some things for personal, whatever the city needs by zoning and things like that. And I've expressed before that I have a cannabis attorney that's been doing that for cities all around, and I'm willing to pay his price to put together an ordinance for adult use, because you're either gonna keep holding on to the medical thing and see how we can get, and we all want medical. You know that's why I'm here, because I've been using it for medical. But the thing of it is, I'm just looking at the big picture on what's going on here, and it's moving to adult use. So you guys gonna spin a lot of wheels making more adult use ordinances, medical ordinances, and then you're gonna have to change them all again. It's all gonna cost you guys a lot more work and a lot more money. So I suggest we take a look at the big picture of what the voters passed in January. Thank you. Thank you.
May I?
Okay, Bill.
Okay, no, I was just, I appreciate your comments. I don't fully agree,
Okay.
because I think you're making a projection about medical cannabis going away.
No, I've been hearing.
No, I'm not going to argue, I'm just making
Okay.
a comment, okay? And then I'm going
Okay.
to make a motion. I think that it's important, we've done vetting, that has been our purpose. I'm not debating with you, I'm just making comment, okay? And I do think that one of the comments is absolutely true, that adult use has to be incorporated in the local regulatory framework if we're going to have regulated operations. And so I'm going to go ahead and make my motion as recommended. And again, this is not for any action tonight, but for direct the staff to come back with a text amendment for us to consider at I guess, the next meeting, or maybe
We would need
2
more
meetings.
time than that,
Okay,
yeah.
then not the next meeting, but the meeting after that, I think. Okay?
We ought to
Should be
bring
enough.
it up tomorrow with priorities.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't like a date certain, so no later than the first meeting in, this is March. So I'm going to say no later than, we could still adjust that tomorrow, no later than the second meeting in May. that we come back with, the staff come back with an ordinance incorporating items 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9 on the term sheet.
1, 4, 5, 7, and 9?
1, 4, 5, it's right in my recommendation
Okay.
here. 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll second that.
Mr. Mayor, I have no particular feeling about recreational use of marijuana or not, but what I find to be very interesting is we had this council chamber full of people demanding that they be given access to medical marijuana, or it was close to the end of the world, that they couldn't survive without it, that they needed it, they were having to go elsewhere to get it, that they relied upon it, and that we were causing them not to be able to get it because of the close down of Shangri-La. Yet now we're hearing, well, guess what? All these people that said they needed it, I guess they don't, because they're not buying it.
That's anecdotal.
I do know for a fact that some of those people are going to the black market. Because it's
Why?
cheaper. Because it's less expensive.
Okay, well then how are you gonna, what are we gonna do to cause the black market to be more expensive
Because
or?
we've incentivized the black market by not allowing adult use with the passage of Prop 64.
So why don't we just make life simple and, did you make your motion?
I did.
I mean, why don't we simply permit adult use rather than being the hypocrites that our society has been for decades?
You know, my motion is
Okay.
just to prepare an ordinance,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
pass anything tonight.
But that's incorporated in your ordinance.
Well, then why don't we just allow dispensaries and you can either have medical marijuana, you don't have to have medical marijuana. It doesn't appear to me that there's a outcry for medical marijuana in our community now. So why don't we just say we're gonna have recreational use dispensaries? If those dispensaries wanna have medical marijuana, great. If they don't, then why do we care about it? The demand will come by the people that want it.
That's right.
Why do we have 3?
Again,
Yeah, well-
the motion's on the table because the structure of the state's regulation, if you don't allow adult use, is incentivizing not using regulated product. And I think I don't think that's the way we should go. I think we should incentivize using regulated product. I think if people have a choice, they would prefer getting regulated product.
I don't disagree with you, but why do we have to then say it can only be a medical marijuana dispensary that can sell recreational? Why don't we just open it wide open to recreational?
Because we want to have quality control over who is offering this product in our community, which we've already done with the 3 licensees that we fully have vetted already.
No, we have quality control over medical marijuana.
No, we'll have quality control over both.
And
Both.
it would be required in our ordinance that I'm proposing, that you already be established according to local standards and acceptable local operation as a medical cannabis dispensary before you can then go on to adult use.
I don't understand why.
Anyway, that's my motion.
Okay. So I'd like to carry this thought out just a little.
We did have a second to that?
Yes, I second
Okay,
it.
go.
So I'd just like to carry this thought a little further. So if we have medical, now we have recreational, and the argument is because it's regulated and it's pure. Tested, okay? What comes next?
That's all there is.
No, what comes next is someone's gonna approach us on, well, we'd like to grow it, and that way we could test it in-house and in our community.
Okay,
And hear me out, I'm just trying to carry my,
That's step 2 to look at,
Bill,
yes.
let Randy
I'm
have
just
a
trying to
say.
project all of this out, because that's what we're doing. We're opening this box
Right.
that isn't going to close. Okay? And we even have the other argument coming before us too, and that's the fact that I can grow 6 plants in my house. When can I take it outside? And all of those that come with it. So we've had the dispensaries open how long?
First off,
Well,
Just,
Many of the cities in California.
Just
I'm not
answer
talking
Jeff,
the many
just
cities.
answer the question. We're
How
gonna be here all
long have
night
the
as it is.
dispensaries been open?
since last fall,
I've been open since January 11th.
Okay.
since
So,
beginning of November.
2009.
so we're not even a year into this, and already we're into the second discussion.
We made our decisions before Prop 64 passed.
That
So-
was before.
Yeah.
You made decisions before. But my question, I'd like to ask
Environment's
Mr. Weirick is,
I'm
why
going
are
to-
you not allowing for anyone other than dispensaries to move forward with adult use? Like, we're not a dispensary, but we would like to open a business in Ojai,
Bliss, I'm gonna-
but you're
Bliss.
eliminating.
Because I want to move deliberately.
Bliss, please, hold just a moment. We
Okay.
have a time thing, don't go away.
Okay.
Okay. We are getting to the 10:30. I would suggest we do this if the council doesn't disagree. We go to item number 7,
Then we go back.
which relates to the compensation for our employees and the handbook. And we trail item number 6. And we can talk about that also tomorrow at the priority meeting. And then finish this topic. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
It is, okay, we go to item number 7. Is this is sort of a pass-fail?
Yeah, do we ever need a staff report if there's a motion to approve?
No, I'll make a motion to adopt the revised employee handbook and updated salary resolution.
Second.
Including full-time.
Okay, it's moved and
salary.
seconded. Is there any discussion on that?
With the appropriation as well? With the recommendation number 2 as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
I had one thing to add to it. The only thing I didn't see in it, I didn't see meal breaks, and I didn't see rest periods. Did I miss something in it?
Well, I would suggest we do that as a,
That's all I recommended. There was nothing in here regarding meal times, half hour, 45 minutes, and there wasn't anything in here
you're
that
talking about
comes.
Fair Labor Standards Act?
Yes, and there wasn't anything, and the only reason I'm bringing that up is the fact that I just got hit with my workman's comp company regarding this stuff.
Okay.
And I just didn't see it in our handbook.
I see. Okay.
So,
My
if you're,
suggestion is we adopt this and we then have staff look into that to be
Yes.
sure that we're in
Yes.
compliance with Fair Labor
Yes.
Standards Act.
great.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, call the roll.
Mayor Johnston,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz.
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Yes.
Okay, now we'll go back to the order, okay?
Could I finish answering the other question?
Yeah, go.
The reason is that we need to do further deliberation on how to diversify, or if we want to diversify further. We're not finished with that process, but I think we are finished with the process sufficiently to recommend the adult use looking at an ordinance first step, before we get to that second step, in terms of first step being the adult use allowance for the already operating medical cannabis dispensaries. I think that's the core of my recommendation. And another answer, Randy, to answer your question, let's learn the lessons of prohibition. If you don't regulate it, if you don't license it, you get a lot of unintended negative consequences. So, anyway.
Okay, we have a movement,
I have a
motion and a
question.
second. You have a question?
Yeah. Have we eliminated the need for appointments?
Right now, that's actually in the term sheet.
Okay, that's,
I believe it's number,
Can we do that, though?
we eliminated the appointment lead time, but we still
Correct.
have appointments.
Correct.
Appointments without lead time.
But in
Right,
his
so they
text,
can
he's
just walk
asking.
in and.
Right.
Correct,
his
unless
text,
there's
he's
not an
asking for that.
available person.
And if
To
you look
eliminate
at number 7,
that is number 7.
number 7 is eliminate all appointment requirements for retail dispensaries.
Okay, good.
So my recommendation is that we look at an ordinance prepared according to the term sheet principles. I've already, just to restate the motion, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. We're going to further be looking at moving ahead on other items, 2, 3, and 8, but the motion only has to do with the first step right now.
Are we going to require an additional permit?
You have to get,
License?
yes, you must get the adult use permit. That's an additional permit.
Well, it sounds to me like this is not yet crafted. Why doesn't the subcommittee with the staff draw up whatever it is that you want us to
Well,
take a look at?
basically, we're asking the council to approve our engaging staff time to draft a proposed ordinance, text amendment. Yes, yeah, Mayor, that's what we're asking.
Well, okay, I would suggest then that we trail this, and we bring this up tomorrow at the, for priorities. The staff has got to decide what they work on next, and we're constantly giving them something to do that's not real simple, and that is gonna take their time. This may be the priority item.
So do we add this to the task list tomorrow?
Yeah.
Why don't we vote on that?
Okay. Does we,
I'll have a
any
second.
objection to
No.
putting it on the task list for tomorrow? Okay.
Okay.
So ordered.
And then Francine, Council Francine and myself will be continuing with the process of looking at the, in consultation with law enforcement, the city manager's office, on looking at some of the vertical integration of these other licenses, the kind of thing that Paige Bliss is talking about, as well as other people.
Well, I'd like to just make one comment, though it's getting late, but what Randy was saying, I mean, it's kind of harsh, but, you know, we are a market-based economy, which is a reason why I had concerns initially of starting out with 3 until we understood all these complications. So now we got 3 people investing in things, and now that's the camel's nose, so to speak. You should excuse the analogy. But now it's going to the next level, and the next level, it seems to me we really should think this through to be sure we know what we're doing. When people say that they're angry about they voted for Prop 64, Prop 64 allowed for all this kind of discussion and local distinction in the rules and the laws we apply.
Right.
And there are places like what is now being affectionately referred to as Pot Hueneme, seems to have opened up to most things. And so people have other options within the county. I know that doesn't help a specific business, but this originally started, as it was pointed out, as a medical effort, and now we're realizing that, you know, anybody reads the newspapers, the black market and all the other unintended consequences to this point. I think we should be sure we're thinking this through this time and controlling it, because we're just talking about now becoming, you know, the, what was the name of the Upper Ojai? They had an advertising, something, not your name, but the something Bliss.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yes, right. Anyway, my feeling is that it needs, you know, we need to do something, but I'm not sure this is it, so I'm not prepared to do it tonight, and we
But we're
can
gonna,
talk
we're
again
gonna,
tomorrow and
it's
go
o-
to staff.
you're okay with staff preparing an ordinance to look at?
Well, I'm
or the-
okay with us adding this to our
Add it
task
to our
list
task list
tomorrow, and then we
Okay.
can decide what we do from there.
All
I
right.
think that would, okay?
So I haven't heard definition back to staff in terms of the what. We'll discuss it tomorrow in terms of,
Tomorrow, we will determine what that is in the priority setting and just, in identifying what it is that is.
okay.
Yeah,
In that thought process, though, I don't want to
My
lose.
issue here.
we're not asking you to
That's-
do anything tonight.
Right.
Mayor and council, on your agenda tomorrow, you couldn't discuss the what. You can discuss the when. The
Right.
Priority setting item allows you to decide when something
So
will
this
return
will
to
be
you.
added to the task list for consideration tomorrow.
But as I understood the motion, the what is set by Councilmember Wyrick's recitation of these 6 term items. You couldn't decide, your item tomorrow is to set the priorities as the when it would return. You couldn't structure how it would come.
So the question is
How will it
whether we
come back?
want to
Does that
vote to
distinction make
define the
sense?
what for tomorrow.
Just want to put that off.
Priority, we are limited as to what things we have on the priority list?
No, you're limited, in the priority discussion, you're limited to setting when things return. You can't discuss
Great.
how they're going to be divided, you can't discuss
The detail.
what will come back.
So what,
Yeah, okay.
the argument is whether we should vote on the motion to determine the what without setting a priority.
Okay.
That's what I understood, the action just
Or
taken
you-
by
Can
consensus.
we adjourn this meeting to tomorrow so
Yes.
that we can then do it?
You can adjourn this item to tomorrow's meeting.
Yeah, there you
Okay, so why
go.
don't we
As
do
an
that?
option.
Take this up at tomorrow's meeting before we get into the priorities.
Or whenever.
It'll be agenda item
Yeah,
one.
it would make sense to do it early.
Agenda item 1 before we get to the priorities tomorrow.
Makes sense.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay?
All
Okay,
right.
city
Noon
attorney agrees?
tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, Brown Act allows you to adjourn it without doing a new agenda within 5 days, so you can just add it to your already planned meeting tomorrow.
Okay,
We
so
should-
you'll explain that to the clerk to put it into
Yeah.
the action that's
But
just.
it only makes sense if we take it up first, because it defines the what, that then would go into
Correct,
the part
you're
2.
right.
Well, it's also a continuation, because we're not shutting, we're not.
Right.
Just want to make absolutely sure that everybody knows that that meeting is tomorrow at noon in the council chambers.
I gotta drive 200 miles before I come to that meeting tomorrow.
Can I make
Absolutely.
one comment?
Meeting, yeah,
Can I
sure.
make one more comment?
Yes,
Oh, thank you very much. I just wanted to explain about that vertical integration that you're talking about, which is under medical. That would eliminate our option of what we're looking for, which is in Division 8, what you're talking about.
No, it's not, that's not what I'm suggesting.
You're-
That's
aren't
not
you
the,
talking
vertical
about-
integration does not mean that.
Under medical, because I talked to my attorney,
No,
and
that's not.
he said
Bill, let her
volatile,
finish, and then you can-
volatile cannot be done under that vertical integration of a micro business. And so that's why we shifted over to adult use, because what we want to do and the business we want to establish that will provide us with like a dozen employees from the city of Ojai and a lot of revenue.
But this is all what we're still
Oh, you're still discussing?
investigating.
So you might go with adult.
We haven't finished investigating all of that
Oh,
yet.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
so-
apologize. I thought you were only going to go for the micro business aspect.
No,
Okay.
no,
Oh,
we
I
haven't even
apologize.
addressed that.
Oh, perfect. All right, then
Okay,
then
so you
just-
want to get in touch with Councilman Wyrick.
I will then.
It's
Should I
just
be
the
here
issue.
tomorrow at noon?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be here. Thank
3
you so
minutes.
much.
Yeah, tomorrow at noon, okay. Okay, we are, you're welcome.
Thanks, council.
All right. Okay, council member reports. Paul, do you have anything?
I can save mine for tomorrow.
Okay, Randy? No? Bill?
I have future agenda items, a few, but
Okay.
I don't have a council
City
member report.
manager's report, do you have anything you want to talk about, Steve?
Nothing burning.
Okay.
Okay.
No pun intended.
No,
That's good
none
news.
intended.
Nothing burning, we like that, yeah. There are many applications of that this evening, including adult use, so.
I just have some future
Okay, yeah,
agenda
vape
requests.
outside, yeah, but, okay, so that means future agenda items. Bill, you said you had something.
Yeah, I have a few. One is I think that we should put on a future agenda item, the a two-part, the evaluation for the city manager and a compensation discussion. We'll let the city attorney work out the wording on that. That needs to be a future agenda item. I think that the future agenda item ought to be there for us to debate whether we want to make a city contribution to the Chautauqua water effort as part of our general level of support for that discussion. If we're going to do that, it would have to be at the next meeting.
Oh, okay, so,
But that's up to the majority here, whether we want to have it on there or not.
I for one do not.
I would say that I would not be in favor of having staff spend any time putting together a staff report with regard to that. And how are we gonna act on it?
That's a contribution.
Yeah, and then I got a list of them that's like 7.
Well, if there's not a majority, then let's move on,
Yeah.
okay?
Well, unless there's,
If there's no one else, then forget it, okay?
okay,
Last, two more things, real quick. I want to pass out a request that we put on the future agenda item, if it hasn't already there.
Oh, yeah.
This general plan update,
good.
that needs to be on a future agenda item, in particular, where the staff could come back with proposals perhaps for a master environmental assessment.
Okay,
This
that'll
needs to be on
part
a
of
future
discussion
agenda item.
tomorrow for priorities.
That needs to be on the future agenda.
Agreed.
Okay, what
And
else?
next, I want to I want to pass out something that came up before that I'm bringing up again because I have rethought it, and that is for a future agenda item. We look at getting an app for helping us with both code enforcement and with citizen relationship management. This is one particular vendor. And the overwhelming reason I want us to seriously consider this, and I know it was kind of negatively brought up before, is a productivity issue. If a citizen can file a complaint or ask for a code enforcement investigation, and it's self-documenting. In other words, right now, we turn in, a citizen puts in a complaint, somebody has to go out in the field and investigate it and so on and so forth. These apps allow the documentation in terms of time and visual so that there's already the documentation at the point of complaint. And it then tracks, and I think is something we really ought to consider as helping us improve the productivity of our code enforcement. I think we ought to look at these apps. and consider whether leveraging our staff dollars with technology. And
A budget item.
and so I just really think we ought to look at this as a serious option. Both the citizen relationship management type of software and the code enforcement app type of software. I think it's something we ought to look at. Again, most fundamentally from a productivity standpoint, because right now, every complaint that comes in, a person has to go out in the field to even look at it, whereas it could be self-documenting on the
Is this
report.
on your list for tomorrow, for task, or for
Well,
priorities?
it could be.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's what it.
Be a good thing
it
to-
starts there, and then it goes to budget, whether or not
Correct.
we're gonna fund it.
I presume if these apps are out there, they probably have been tested, but I'd have some privacy issues with photographing things and
Yeah.
reporting them to authorities and that kind of thing.
Well, that's how I felt originally. But since this is the public sphere, I'm now looking at it more as a productivity enhancement than a privacy problem, since we're looking at things in the public sphere. In other words, look at,
Sounds like Cambridge Analytica said the same thing, but they justified theirs. That was real productivity.
I think my only concern with it is neighbor disputes and the act of someone actually making your life miserable, and you have no recourse, or it's tit for tat.
Okay, well, we're getting into the merits.
yeah, I don't want to deliberate on it. I
That brings
just,
up something I want to ask.
and then one final thing is, we have budget for a unexpended budget for historic resources surveys. And I think we should,
Underfunded reserve, too.
yeah, there's no, yeah, we have, in other words, we have a budget, unexpended budget for that purpose in the the Preservation Commission budget.
Unexpended appropriations falls to fund balance, which then replenishes the reserve, so,
Well,
yeah, that's the way it works.
all I'm saying is that there is budget for doing an historic resources surveys that have yet to be allocated
In this year?
in this year.
Okay.
And I would like to see one done on the theater, because it would be helpful, I believe, for one to be done sooner rather than later, in anticipation of the reopening
And
of the
sale.
theater.
And the sale, yeah.
Well, I mean, my point.
I would agree with you on that.
So, anyway, I would like to put that on a future agenda for us to direct staff to proceed with getting proposals for an historic resources survey on the theater property. If I get support for that, that's what I'm asking for.
I think when we set our priorities tomorrow, we'll have a better idea of which things we can,
Okay?
yeah. it's
So we
just
put that
all a
on
matter of
the,
time. Yeah, it's certainly.
put that on the task list? Okay.
Hey, did you say you had something?
Yeah, I would like someone to respond to Jerry Dunn's complaint about the SDRs. So I thought that the way it worked was you were looking at the websites, and then,
That's
or if
correct.
a neighbor complained.
That's correct, and we have not slowed down or backed off from that one bit at all.
Yeah, so I was very surprised by what he said. I'm gonna call him up, I know.
We do have them operating, there's no question. The
Yeah.
question is what the enforcement efforts and the way in which we go about it. I'm not saying that the staff's not doing their job, but, if we're measuring it strictly on the number of hits you get on Airbnb, reading the paper how Airbnb is cooperating with the people who are part of their clientele, and as soon as city halls close, the thing pops up. I don't know how we deal with that, but we could increase the level of enforcement, but what he says is true. Whether or not we can do a lot about it, I'm not sure. We just have to have the will.
There was no
Well-
indication whether everyone that he was talking about was in the city. That was the
Right.
implication.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know whether what he said
Right.
it was true or not.
Yeah,
Right, and we frequently do get that complaint, and I'm not saying that there are not ones that operate in the city, but yeah, a lot of times we'll hear that, and they're actually out in the county. But just to remind everybody, there was when this was discussed at council, one of the options was, whether you wanted staff to do sting operations, and staff was told, no, don't do sting operations. So as Councilman Francina said, yes, we've been concentrating on trying to go after the advertisers through the website, and also, of course, following up on complaints. But it's difficult because simply seeing a lot of traffic or out-of-state license plates doesn't necessarily give us enough evidence to be able to go forth with the citation.
We want to.
But we've contacted
Deliberation of
That will
possibly-
many
be-
properties.
I assume that'll be discussed, or could be discussed tomorrow as one
Whether
of the
we,
things.
we
also a budget
change that
item.
direction.
Exactly, absolutely.
Sure.
It's a budget item.
We might want to change that direction of no stings.
That's
Okay, well, do you have anything else? If not, we're.
I just have one other thing for future agenda items that I wanted to bring to council. We received a request or a proposal from the Ventura River Water District. They are contacting several local agencies to see if there is any interest in participating in an economic study on drought impacts. So I wanted to ask the council if they had any interest in looking at this and considering if you wanted to participate in it. They've given a preliminary price tag of the study of about $30,000, but they've not indicated who else would be participating or how that would be split out.
I heard testimony where they were looking at perhaps a $5,000 contribution from agencies like the city.
Okay, they did not specify that.
Steve, on the calendar, we're pretty close to kicking off the budget process.
Yes, we are, Mr. Mayor.
All of this stuff that's gonna cost money of some size, why don't we just couple that together? Because
I don't disagree.
If
I
we do
just-
our budget right, that will be
Right.
our priorities. We'll put our
Right.
money where we think the action needs to.
I don't disagree. I just wanted to make sure that the council was aware that we had received the request.
I will.
Happy to bring that forward
Now,
at the
if
budget
they're
time.
looking for a warm body, I'd nominate Bill, but,
I don't say anything about warm bodies.
Probably want a warm body and some money.
Yeah, there you go. That's all I have.
Okay,
economic guru
okay.
here.
That brings it, did you have it?
No,
Okay,
go
we're adjourned.